Chapter 921. At the instant Su Ming's soul occupied a 5/10 of the golden Venus pathways, and he saw the scene that shocked him. The second half of the divine thought the bald crane had sent to him with its remaining strength before it fainted appeared in his heart. You have to remember to give me crystals because even if I'm unconscious, I managed to delay that damn decaying for some time. I don't know how long I can keep it bewitched for. You have to be quick. When the bald crane's divine thought completely disappeared, a Kang's enraged roar reverberated in the air. Its divine thought swept through the area, but it could not leave a certain area. At the same time, Su Ming saw a picture appearing in his soul. He saw a galaxy. Among the stars, there was a golden sea, and inside the sea was a golden cultivation planet. On that cultivation planet was a golden tree. There was nothing special about it, and it was far from being able to make Su Ming's soul nearly freeze, but this was only the first time he saw it. Su Ming could not describe the world he saw at that moment. He only felt that everything he saw at that moment reminded him of the spider webs he had seen in Dark Mountain when he was still a child. The threads were connected together to form a spider web that looked like a small lattice. It was the image that appeared in Su Ming's mind when he saw the world. Beyond the galaxy with the golden ocean, the golden planet, and the golden tree was another galaxy that was exactly the same. There were many other similar galaxies at its edge, and there was no end to them. When a person saw the same galaxy, they could not help but feel their hearts tremble, and in fact a hint of despair would rise in them. 100,000 galaxies, 100,000 golden oceans, 100,000 golden planets, and 100,000 golden trees. The pictures that appeared in Su Ming's soul caused his heart to roar. In fact, he saw 97 of the 100,000 galaxies with 97 cultivators in them. Some of them were still in the golden ocean, some were close to the golden planets, and some were struggling in the highest layer of wind. Su Ming had seen these people before. They were most of the 124 people who had stepped into the stone monument's test to make it reach 1 million feet. As for the dozens of people missing, it was clear that those people had already failed. I used up everything I had, and even the Baldy was heavily injured and unconscious. Only then did I manage to possess half of it. But what I thought was half of it was only half of one of the 100,000 galaxies, 100,000 cultivation planets, and 100,000 Akang trees. How can I possess this sort of living being? Su Ming mumbled. He was shocked by what he saw, and at the same time, despair rose in his heart. It could even be said that there was no such thing as a possession. That was because there was no one who could possess 100,000 of them. If there really was someone who could do it with their powerful cultivation, then there was no need for that person to possess them. That was because the person who could do it was definitely one of the strongest in the world. Is it really impossible for me to succeed? Am I really going to fail like this? Could it be that all my previous efforts, almost 1,000 years of struggle, hundreds of years of waiting, will be in vain? Will it all be a joke? Could it be that the Baldy's heavy injuries had even bought me some time, but all I got in return is a fate that will bring despair to me? Could it be that I'm going to give up just like this and only be able to leave this place after tens of thousands of years? I'll become a common mortal like the others? I'll only be an ant for the rest of my life. A person whose fate is controlled by others, who can only watch the lives and deaths of the people I want to protect being controlled by the powerful over and over again. Violent ripples spread out from Su Ming's soul. Once the 100,000 planets appeared, he went through a blow of despair. It made him, who had originally thought that he was halfway to success, suddenly realize that his success was so small that it was laughably small, and he could not accept this reality. I will absolutely not give up, much less accept this. I am Su Ming. I am an abyss builder. I have lived a miserable life, and I have never been able to control my own fate. In fact, even my physical body was sealed by the immortals. Right now, I only have a wisp of my soul left. Universe, fate, just how long are you going to continue toying with me? Frenzied ripples spread out from Su Ming's soul, and his roars shook the sky and earth. Those roars contained Su Ming's rebellion against fate, and for the first time in his life, he was truly and completely fighting against fate. At the instant the powerful ripples spread out from Su Ming's soul, the 100,000 galaxies, 100,000 golden oceans, and 100,000 planets suddenly started trembling, as if they were being shaken by the madness in Su Ming's soul. Booming sounds continued without end, and the tremors continued in the 100,000 galaxies, causing the expressions of the 97 people who were going through the test to suddenly change drastically. Almost all of them looked around themselves, at a loss, not knowing what was going on. The golden ocean roared and tumbled about, and the galaxy they were in started trembling as if the earth was shaking and the mountains were shaking. You asked me to grow in Dark Mountain, then you snatched it away, and now you're telling me that all of this is just a dream. Su Ming laughed long and hard. There was ridicule in his laughter, along with a roar towards the heavens and fate. The 100,000 galaxies started trembling even more furiously. In fact, cracks even appeared in some of them, and black smoke surged into the sky from the half of the Venus pathways Su Ming occupied. It tumbled about violently and spread out with a bang. You allowed me to come to the 9th summit and gave me warmth, but in the end, you laughed coldly and took all of it away. You made it all just a dream, and you manipulated my fate as if I was a puppet. Su Ming's laughter was shrill and forlorn. The 100,000 galaxies roared with him, and the faces of the 97 people who were going through the test turned stark pale. They might not know what was going on, but they could sense that there was a crazed will in the galaxy they were in. That will was filled with an unwillingness to accept fate and a rebellion against the universe, and it was spreading out violently. You made me the god of berserkers, but once I became the god of berserkers, you took everything from me. You made me watch Yu Xian close her eyes, watch Bai Su disappear, watch everyone die, and you made me leave the land of berserkers and come to the barren lands of divine essence. You made me possess great power, but you also forced me into the foreign land and trapped me for 1,000 years. As the black smoke tumbled about in the half of the Venus pathways Su Ming occupied, the black Venus pathways immediately started distorting and gradually turned into a face. That face belonged to Su Ming. His expression was ferocious, and his laughter became even shriller as he fought against fate. You gave me the possibility of obtaining a great serendipity in the foreign land, and you even allowed me to occupy half of the Venus pathways. But in the end, you told me that all of this is just half of one of the 100,000 trees. Fate, universe, just how long are you going to continue toying with me? In your eyes, am I truly unable to fight back and kill you? The 100,000 star systems rumbled at the same time, and all of them trembled violently. Cracks spread out from the 100,000 star systems, and strands of black gas came out from those cracks. The black gas continued to spread out, and more of it appeared. In the end, it formed 100,000 faces. 100,000 of Su Ming's faces. This was not naturally caused by Su Ming's roars, and neither was it because of his roars that the laws of the world had opened up a gap for him to do this. It was also not because Su Ming possessed some sort of strange ability that allowed him to make all the people in the area bow their heads and worship him with just his roars alone. He had been able to do this and formed 100,000 faces because he did not know that he had occupied half of the Venus pathways in one tree, which meant that he had occupied half of all the Venus pathways in all the trees. 100,000 trees were in truth just one tree. If he obtained one, he would obtain all of them. However, if Su Ming had given up due to despair, then he would have still failed in the end. It was precisely because of his persistence that he had the chance to see the true face and the chance to possess it once more. Sometimes, as long as one tried their best to break through, they might discover that the line between truth and falsehood, between illusion and reality, was only a thin line. The logic behind it was simple, and it might seem easy, but how many people could truly do it? There was a bottomless abyss before them, and how many people would dare to take that step forward? It was just like a person climbing a mountain. He originally thought that he had climbed half of the way up, and when there was still half of the way up, he would be filled with strength. But if he originally thought that there was only half of the way up, but when he lifted his head, he suddenly discovered that this half was insignificant, and when there was still a boundless cliff above him, his strength would fade away with despair. He would no longer be able to hold on to the wall, and he would fall to his death. How many people would be able to persevere and climb up? This was the true reason why Su Ming could make the 100,000 faces made of black smoke appear in the 100,000 galaxies. Ever since I could remember, I have never given up. I have always been moving forward, and there's always been an obsession in my heart. Even if that obsession has turned into obsession, even if it has tormented me and driven me mad, I have never given up on any possibility. Do you know why I did all of this? Do you know what made me do this? Because when I was young, I want to find my elder. Because when I grew up, I learned that my memories were just a dream. Because when I became the god of berserkers, I learned that everything was just someone else's plan. All of these things accumulated in my heart, and time after time, they pressed down on me until I could not breathe, and I even thought about not struggling. But I could not accept it. I did not want to become a puppet. I did not want to be manipulated by fate, because I knew that unless you could truly crush me, there would come a day when I would stand up and trample on fate. I would make all my enemies in the universe, and I would dye the world red with their blood. I would make them despair. Su Ming's face, formed by the 100,000 galaxies and the 100,000 black smoke, let out a sword cry against fate at the same time. As the booming sounds reverberated in the air, besides the faces in Su Ming's Venus pathways, all the other faces rushed towards the golden ocean, the golden cultivation planet, and the golden tree. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 922. At the same time, as the 100,000 galaxies rumbled, the cultivators who were taking the test in the 97 galaxies were all shocked, and their bodies were forced out of the galaxy they were in. When they reappeared, they were forcibly teleported to the place where the 100,000 stone steels were. As they appeared at the same time, and as shock and disbelief appeared on their faces, all the people in the world with the 100,000 stone monuments swiftly looked over. 97 people failed at the same time and returned at the same time. Their stone monuments shone at the same time and shrank at the same time. This was something that had never happened in this place over the course of countless years. What happened? Why did all these people appear in an instant? 97 stone monuments shrank from nearly 100,000 feet to several tens of thousands of feet at the same time. Just what is going on? As the buzzing sounds from the other people echoed in the air, the 97 people who had been forced out had pale faces. In silence, they swept their gazes towards each other, and all of them saw the shock and astonishment in each other's eyes. That's not right. One of the stone monuments is nearly 1 million feet. This person, he didn't appear. As that voice spread out, the gazes of all the people in the area, including those of the 97 people, instantly gathered on Su Ming's stone monument. The buzzing sound instantly turned into a deathly silence. Everyone's eyes reflected the two words engraved on the stone tablet. Mo Su. Within the golden Venus pathways, Su Ming occupied half of the area that had turned into his face. At that moment, his voice was filled with determination as it reverberated in all directions. Most importantly, I don't care if you teased me, but you shouldn't have affected the people around me. I will fight against you because I will protect my family. I will protect all the people who are kind to me. I will protect them. This is the only determination in my life that has supported me and allowed me to walk down this path. Protect. This is the only reason why I still have the courage to continue living. I want to become stronger. I want to make myself the strongest in the universe because I don't want to see the people who are kind to me cry anymore. I don't want to see them die. I want to protect all of this. They're the most precious to me. They're my life. An incredibly powerful ripple spread out from Su Ming's soul. This was Su Ming's roar. This was Su Ming's cry. This was his strongest roar towards fate from the bottom of his heart. Boom! Beside Su Ming's face, all the faces formed by the black smoke in the 100,000 galaxies shot through all obstacles and appeared around the golden trees. Without stopping, they instantly branded themselves on the trees and shot through the trunks to rush into the golden Venus pathways on each tree. In the blink of an eye, the golden Venus pathways in the 100,000 decaying trees let out booming sounds that shook the sky and earth. For Dark Mountain, for Elder, I was willing to burn my life back then. I was willing to swallow medicinal herbs to strengthen myself and blast open that door. It was because I cared about the tribe. I wanted to protect it. Su Ming's voice echoed in the air, and the Venus pathways in the 100,000 trees were devoured and occupied by the black face. I have lived a miserable life. I have walked this path to find Elder. I want to protect him. I want him to smile happily. I want him to see that his little La, Su, has grown up and can stand in front of him to protect him. The 100,000 faces roared and instantly occupied the Venus pathways. Finally, half of the 100,000 trees and 100,000 Venus pathways belonged to Su Ming. I became the god of berserkers and shouldered the fate of the berserkers. Even if I'm not a berserker, my senior brothers are, my master is, and my friends are. For them, I can give up on my struggles. As long as they are happy, I can become some god of berserkers and obtain new glory for the berserkers. Once half of the 100,000 Venus pathways on the 100,000 trees were under Su Ming's control, he roared, and the Venus pathways on the 100,000 trees spread out at the same time. Ikangswell was struggling madly, wanting to rush out of the seal left behind by the bald crane before it fainted. This was a seal placed by the bald crane by burning its soul. Its might was so great that even a king would need to spend some time before it could rush out. I came to the barren lands of divine essence to protect the ninth summit. I don't want them to cry. I don't want my senior brothers to die. I can sacrifice myself. I can lose my emotions and pain. I can come to this unfamiliar place. As long as they are alive, I will be happy. This is the determination in my heart. It is my obsession. For this obsession, even if I end up in a sea of blood that surges into the sky, even if my hands are stained with blood, so what? I will never give up. Su Ming's voice echoed in the air. The number of Venus pathways on the 100,000 trees increased from 50 to 56. It might have seemed like it had only increased by 600ths, but in truth, it was definitely not a simple calculation because this was not a 5600ths increase from one tree, but 5600ths from all 100,000 trees. Boom! The seal left behind by the bald crane before it fainted was broken by a king at that moment. As Ikangswell spread out from within, its enraged roars shook the sky and earth in the world of the Venus pathways. Even if Sui Chunzi's law protects you, it's impossible for you to successfully possess me. Get lost! Get lost! Get lost! Ikang's anger surged into the sky. Over the countless years, there had been plenty of people who wanted to possess it, but none of them had managed to occupy more than half of its body. In fact, this was not just a simple half, but half of its entire body. This gave it a great sense of threat. If it was not because it had to fight against Sui Chunzi's law, which meant that it would have to pay a price that even it could not bear, it would have definitely killed Su Ming immediately. It would not have been able to chase Su Ming out of its body under the law. Get lost! Get lost! Get lost! Ikangswell roared and crashed straight into the mask formed by the Venus pathways Su Ming occupied. In fact, this was not just a single place where the will crashed into Su Ming's will. Instead, a will erupted from the 100,000 trees and 100,000 bodies at the same time. Booming sound spread out. Without the bald crane's resistance, Su Ming was the first to bear the brunt. The moment Ikang said the first word to get lost, his soul trembled. It was impossible for him to fight back against Ikang's power. As it suppressed everything, it also turned into a power that could reverse time and swept up Su Ming's soul, pushing him back from the 56th of the Venus pathways to the 53rd. The face formed by Su Ming's body turned ferocious. During that instant, his soul erupted completely, and without any hesitation, he chose to burn his soul. It was just as he had said previously. Unless fate crushed him, then he would trample on fate. It was the same in this place. Unless a king could destroy him, then Su Ming would definitely succeed in possessing it. Even if he died, he had to succeed. His soul burned, and Su Ming swiftly fought against the Kang's will. Boom, boom, boom. After several continuous clashes, the area Su Ming occupied shrank from the 53rd to the 45th, but once it fell back to the 45th, Su Ming burned his soul to its peak. He no longer moved back. Instead, as he continued crashing against the Kang's will, he returned from the 45th back to the 46th, then the 47th, and when he reached the 48th, he could no longer continue, but a Kang could no longer make a move back either. Intense pain shot through his soul. His soul was rapidly becoming incomplete, and as it burned away, Su Ming's madness was displayed to its fullest. Foolish cultivator, did you think you can possess me just by burning your soul? I don't even need to continue suppressing you. All I need to do is stop your soul from spreading. It won't take long for you to burn your soul and die. Foolish life, you're definitely going to lose. You're definitely going to die. When a Kang's voice echoed in the air, most of Su Ming's soul had already been burned. However, the faces formed by the Venus pathways he occupied had a bizarre smile on them at that instant. The 100,000 faces smiled at the same time, stunning a Kang. At that moment, Su Ming's voice traveled through the 100,000 galaxies and 100,000 Kang trees at the same time. Ancient existence in Death region, I know that you can hear my voice. In fact, all my actions since I came to the barren lands of divine essence have been under your surveillance. You've also seen what I'm doing right now. Either you help me fight against the Kang's will, and if I succeed, I will obtain this serendipity and help you find your king. If you don't help me, then it's fine if my soul dies, but it's impossible for you to find someone like me in Death region to help you find your king. As Su Ming's voice echoed in the air, an enraged roar came from the depths of Death vortex in true Morning Dao world, which was located incredibly far away from the barren lands of divine essence. Su Ming's soul was still burning, but after the span of 3 breaths, an incredibly ancient presence suddenly appeared in his soul. There was not just one presence, but 4 of them. At the instant they appeared, they spread out from Su Ming's soul and formed an illusory black mask. That mask was the seal that had been branded on Su Ming. At the instant the 4 presences spread out, 4 suns appeared beside them. These 4 suns were green, red, blue, and white, and exuded an ancient air. They surrounded the mask and spun rapidly before charging towards a Kang's will with a bang. Damn it, just what else do you have on you? That traitor, thieving crane, and you even have the protection of the divine thoughts of 4 half-step masters of fate. After being momentarily stunned, a Kang let out an enraged roar and swept forward with its will. Abyss Builders, remember this. You have to help us find our king. We are the Whirlpool tribe, Great Gang tribe, and Yunny tribe from the 5th True World. If you don't keep to your promise, then we will definitely destroy the entire Berserker race. The 4 divine thoughts surrounded the mask and spread out in all directions. Enough with the nonsense. Why aren't you attacking? Su Ming let out a cold harumph. They did not have a choice. Forcing them to attack was part of Su Ming's plan to possess a Kang. Su Ming had been thinking about it for 400-something years, and he had already calculated all the possible changes. Even if these people refused, he still had a way to force them to attack. Boom, boom, boom. At the instant both sides crashed into each other, another person went to help Su Ming fight against the Kang. As Su Ming's soul burned, an indescribable speed erupted forth from it. As it spread out, the Venus pathways and the 100,000 trees in the 100,000 galaxies started spreading out from 48, 49, 51, 53, 55, until it reached 60. It still continued. 61, 62, 63, 65, 67. Booming sounds reverberated in the air, and the mass that represented the 4 great divine thoughts of Death region shattered to pieces. The 4 suns around it also turned into an endless amount of crystalline sparks that scattered away. as the mask shattered and the four divine thoughts disappeared. Death Region's ancient will's control over Su Ming was completely lost. This meant that Su Ming had taken a huge step forward in his path of fighting against fate. He had successfully broken free of the restrictions placed on him by Death Region, and he had successfully turned the tables. From then on, he no longer needed to be sealed by Death Region. He had obtained his complete self, and the existences in Death Region did not dare to do anything to the Berserkers, because they still needed Su Ming to help them find the kings of their three races. Damn you, cultivator. I'd like to see just what else you have besides the traitor crane and these four divine thoughts protecting you. Even if you occupy more areas, it's useless. Your soul is about to be completely burned. You're about to die. I'd like to see just what other tricks you have up your sleeves. Ikang roared furiously. Once it crushed the mask and the four divine thoughts, it swept towards Su Ming once again. At the instant its divine thoughts charged towards him with loud booming sounds, Su Ming, who had occupied 69/100ths of all the Venus pathways in the 100,000 trees, had that bizarre smile appear on his face once again. Possessing you is the greatest serendipity I've ever had in my memories. Around 7/10ths of Su Ming's soul had already been burned. As he smiled, madness appeared in his eyes as he mumbled, "But possessing you isn't the most important thing in my life." The madness in Su Ming's eyes grew stronger, as if flames had been lit in his eyes. "Possessing you is just a process. What I want is to use your power during this process to completely break free from other people's control and become my true self. The existence in Death Region is just one of them. And Dtion, I originally thought that I had already broken free from your control and walked out of your plans, but then I saw all the faces on Ikang's numerous branches, but I didn't see you. At that moment, I knew that you're still controlling me. Your plan hasn't failed at all. In fact, everything about me is still a part of your plan. Ikang has manifested all the faces, but you're not there, just like how I'm not there. I can't see myself, and neither can I see you. Then does that mean that you used some sort of method to make you become me, and I become you? Did you make our souls fuse together in a certain sense? I don't know what your plan is, but based on all sorts of clues over the years, I can vaguely guess that you want my life. It's not my life, but my life as an abyss builder. If that's the case, then either you die with me, or get out of my soul. This was all the crazed thoughts that had sprouted in Su Ming's mind after his first failure hundreds of years ago. Possessing Dtion was nothing. It was just a serendipity. Breaking free from the control of fate was the most important thing for Su Ming. Perhaps he was wrong. He had no confidence in whether Dtion had fused with his soul in some way. However, if Hong Luo and the three powerful warriors in Solar Culpa realm could be found in his soul, then there was also a possibility that Dtion was in his soul. The more he could not figure out this sort of control, the more difficult it would be for him to break free. He could only use his life as a bet and take a bold gamble, doing what a normal person could not do. Dtion, are you going to get lost or not? Su Ming roared, and the 100,000 faces in the 100,000 trees and 100,000 galaxies roared together. There were 4,000 words in this chapter. I was missing 1,000 words yesterday, and I've immediately added them today. Are you still going to say that I'm not being kind? But I do have to be kind. It's the new year, and I'll first wish all of you a happy new year. Then, from tomorrow until the 5th day, I'll only be able to write one chapter every day. Besides, I shouldn't have added any more chapters. I've been writing about seeking demons for a year, and I wanted to spend time with my family during the new year while also straightening out my thoughts. Seeking Demons has reached a critical moment, and I want all of you to have a good time reading it. I'll use this time to think about the later parts of the plot. I'll bend my back, wrap my fist in my palm, and ask everyone not to hit me or scold me. I'll also extend my hand and ask for a red envelope filled with love. This sounds a little mushy. Huh? Don't get goosebumps, just put them in the red envelope and give them to me. Haha, I'll stop talking. I wish all of you a happy new year and a happy life. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 923. At the instant, the 100,000 faces in Western Ring Nebula's foreign land in the barren lands of divine essence let out a low roar. Far beyond the barren lands of divine essence was the Immortals Galaxy in true Morning Tao world, one of the four great true worlds. There was an incredibly strange celestial body formed by 108 cultivation planets. From a distance, it looked like a leaf filled with veins. It floated in the galaxy in a dazzling manner and shone with a light that reached 100,000 feet. The mighty pressure formed by the 108 planets gathered together intimidated the entire galaxy. This was a famous place in the Immortals Galaxy. Great Leaf Immortal Sect's strongest sect. Countless long arcs moved through the celestial body and the planet. The people coming and going were all disciples of Great Leaf Immortal Sect who had either left or returned. When Su Ming swept his gaze over the place, he found that there were several hundreds of thousands of them. Several 100,000 people might not seem like a small number, but compared to the 108 enormous planets, these several 100,000 people seemed extremely insignificant. Judging from a scale of the sect, the number of disciples in the Great Leaf Immortal Sect must have reached an extremely majestic number. At that moment, in a cultivation planet located in the deepest part of the celestial body that looked like a leaf was a cultivation planet. It was a world filled with green grass. There was a gentle breeze blowing against it. The sky was blue, and there were a few white clouds floating in the air, causing the place to be filled with tranquility. There was a lake on the grass, and there was a middle-aged man dressed in a robe made of coarse cloth. He held a fishing rod in his hand and looked as if he was dozing off. He had a peaceful expression on his face, and there was a faint smile on his face. However, there were countless wild wolves crawling on the grass beside him. The eyes of these wild wolves shone with a red light as they stared at the middle-aged man without moving. Yet at that moment, the middle-aged man suddenly frowned slightly. This action immediately caused the peaceful expression on his face to disappear, and he slowly opened his eyes. They were a pair of phoenix eyes, and they gave the man a strange charm. However, at that moment, focus and darkness gradually appeared in his eyes. "I do not like naughty children," the middle-aged man mumbled to himself. The middle-aged man muttered to himself. His right hand was still holding onto the fishing rod. He slowly closed his eyes as if nothing had happened. Within Western Ring Nebula's foreign land in the barren lands of divine essence, Su Ming's low roar reverberated in the air. His soul was burning rapidly, and from the previous 7/10, it swiftly burned to 8/10. It was fighting fiercely against Ikang's will. Ikang's will roared and roared, preventing Su Ming from continuing spreading out. In its eyes, Su Ming was already near the end of his life. The burning of his soul was just a little bit away from completely dispersing. At that time, Ikang would not even need to exert any effort. Su Ming would immediately disappear into thin air. The 100,000 Su Ming's faces were filled with determination at that moment. They did not change their minds in the slightest. Even if he had already burned most of his soul, as long as Tian did not appear, he would not give up, even if he was about to die. This was a gamble and also a competition of endurance. It was a choice between him and Tian. A kite has a string, so even if it flies to the 9 heavens, it will still be controlled by others. If I, Su, am unable to sever the string of a kite in this life, unable to soar in the sky as I please, then living is no different from dying. Once the string is severed, I, Su, will be free from then on. A resolute light shone in the eyes of the 100,000 Su Ming's faces at the same time. Another 5% of the burning of his soul instantly disappeared from 8/10. At that moment, the middle-aged man in coarse robes opened his eyes in Great Leaf Immortal Sect, which was located in the territory of the Immortals in Morning Tao Galaxy. Beyond the lake covered in grass was a middle-aged man in coarse robes. He opened his eyes again, and this time, aside from a dark look, there was also a solemn look in his eyes. However, his grip on the fishing rod was still as steady as ever. Ripples suddenly appeared in the lake before him. The middle-aged man lifted his right hand, and a golden fish was flung out of the water with a hook in its mouth. As water droplets splashed in all directions, a wild wolf in the grass by the side swiftly leaped up and charged towards the golden fish. It opened its mouth wide, intending to devour it. I do not like those who take the initiative. The middle-aged man's gaze turned even darker. He did not seem to have done anything. But at the instant he said those words, the wild wolf that had leaped up suddenly shuddered and withered rapidly. Its teeth fell off, its fur shriveled, and its body turned into dust in an instant. Even the teeth and fur that fell off did not manage to fall into the lake before they turned into ashes. It was as if 1,000 years had passed on its body in an instant. The Abyss Builder's inborn talent. What a despicable race. What an enviable race. The middle-aged man's expression turned even darker. He slowly stood up and let go of the fishing rod in his right hand, then turned around and took a step into the air. His body disappeared in an instant, and when he reappeared, he had already traveled an unknown amount of distance. From the first mountain of Great Leaf Immortal Sect, he arrived outside Death region, right outside the vast ruin formed by the countless floating continents. When he appeared, he was no longer dressed in coarse robes. Instead, he was dressed in a long golden robe and had a golden crown on his head. His face was awe-inspiring, and wherever he went, all the cultivators who saw him would immediately bow down and worship him. He continued walking until he stood at the center of the fragment of the continent, right beside the corpse that had been sealed here for countless years on the highest altar. He looked at the pale, frail young man before him who had his eyes closed. The man fell silent, but suddenly, Su Ming's real body started showing signs of withering away. His skin started wrinkling, and his hair gradually lost its luster. This was a sign that his soul was about to die. Once his soul died, the corpse would wither away and disappear along with his soul. This scene finally caused the middle-aged man and Di Tian's expression to change. He had not believed what he had sensed previously, but now that the truth was right before his eyes, he had no choice but to believe it. Su Ming had run into a danger he could not fight against, and was burning his soul, and he had already burned nearly 9/10 of it. Perhaps you've truly run into a life and death situation, or perhaps you've discovered some clues. If it's the former, then it would be fine, but if it's the latter, Di Tian let out a cold harumph. He was still frowning. There was some sort of unique fusion between his soul and Su Ming's. Once Su Ming died, then he would also be gravely injured. In fact, he might not even be able to increase his level of cultivation for the rest of his life. In truth, his plan had always been a gamble. I only need 300 more years, and I will succeed 300 years. Di Tian fell silent. He stared at Su Ming's physical body and did not say a single word. When a large amount of black spots appeared on Su Ming's skin and a rotting stench spread out from him, even his hair fell off, Di Tian's heart wavered for the first time. 95%, 95%. I've already burned 95% of my soul, but Di Tian still hasn't appeared. Could it be that I was wrong? The burning of Su Ming's soul had reached its peak in Western Ring Nebula's foreign land. Ikang's laughter echoed in the air, and the 100,000 Su Ming faces also wavered at that instant. If this continued, he would truly die. If he gave up now, he would still have a chance to live, but he had already reached this point. After a short period of silence, a ruthless look appeared on Su Ming's face. If I was wrong, then I will be free from this. This is my choice, and I will admit to it. Without any hesitation, Su Ming burned his soul once again. He burned 95% of his soul, and it rose once again. If the remaining 5% of his soul was divided into 5 portions, then Su Ming only had 4 portions left, and it was still decreasing. At the instant Su Ming burned his soul, he did not know whether it was a figment of his imagination, but he heard a faint voice in his heart. This world is built for Abyss. That voice said these 4 words. These were the words that had echoed in Su Ming's soul when he was in Death region. This time, even a Kang's will was shaken. It had seen crazed people before, but it had never seen someone as mad as Su Ming. He had already reached this point, but he still persisted. This was the same as gambling with his life. Di Tian, who was in the Immortals galaxy, was also shaken. His relaxed demeanor disappeared at that moment. Blood capillaries appeared in his ferocious eyes as he glared at Su Ming's physical body. As he watched it swiftly rotting away, the tremors in his heart grew even stronger. When there were only 3 portions of his burning soul left, Di Tian shuddered faintly. This was an invisible battle, a battle of arts that could not be seen. It was a competition to see who was more ruthless and who would be the first to be unable to withstand the pain. Di Tian's expression twisted. He could not accept that his plan had truly failed just like this, but he had no way of knowing whether Su Ming was truly facing danger at that moment or whether all of this was just him fighting back. As he struggled, he saw Su Ming's physical body rotting away even more. In fact, when he no longer looked human, only 2 portions of his soul remained. The flow of time seemed to have been stretched out in an unseen manner. This was a form of torture and test for Su Ming, and it was the same for Di Tian. When there was only 1 portion of Su Ming's soul left, Di Tian threw his head back and let out an enraged roar. There was anger in that roar, along with the resignation of destroying his plan with his own hands, as well as the resentment that came from the passage of time. As he roared, Di Tian lifted his right hand and struck the center of his brows. At the instant he did so, a golden light suddenly erupted from Su Ming's soul, which was burning so much that his mind was about to fall into a state of delirium. That light swiftly flew out, and a furious roar that echoed faintly in the air spread out from Su Ming's soul as the golden light disappeared. Su Ming was familiar with that furious roar. It was Di Tian's voice. Su Ming had won this invisible battle of arts. He laughed long and hard. Contained within that laughter was the resistance he had fought against fate over the course of countless years, along with Su Ming's determination and determination. If he won the battle of arts, then he would have won his freedom. If he could get through a Kang's disaster, then from then on, he would break free from everyone's control, and his future would have endless possibilities. This was the saying that he had to break out of an extraordinary situation, and he had to do something extraordinary. However, the price for breaking free from Di Tian's control was also incredibly devastating. There was only 1 wisp of Su Ming's soul left, and it was still burning at that moment. There were 2 paths laid out before him. One of them was to give up on all forms of resistance. With Sui Chanzi's law around, there was a possibility that he could gather his soul together once more and return to his physical body. However, he would have to face an unknown test, because there was a higher possibility that if he gathered his soul together once more under the reversal of time, the seal that had previously existed in his soul might also be gathered together once more. No one knew what the results would be. Su Ming had a second path, and he was certain that the seal would not gather together once more. He had to continue walking down this path. A glint appeared in the eyes of the 100,000 Su Ming faces. All of this was part of Su Ming's plan. During the 400 years of analysis, he had managed to come up with a few possible dead ends or new paths. At that moment, the second path was this one. Without any hesitation, he chose the second path. At the instant his soul completely burned, the impact that erupted from his body was incredibly strong. Kang's will laughed coldly and did not stop him. It knew that this was Su Ming's final act of madness. After this, he would definitely die. I am a dead person to begin with, and even my soul is a dead soul. I can't touch bright sun. Then what will happen if a dead soul dies again? As the burning of Su Ming's soul spread out, it instantly went from the 67th to 8000ths. Booming sounds reverberated in Su Ming's mind, and a new picture appeared. He saw Western Ring Nebula's foreign land beyond the 100,000 golden seas. It was as if during that instant, Su Ming's divine sense had expanded endlessly and covered the entire foreign land. It even spread outwards to cover Western Ring Nebula. However, the Western Ring Nebula in Su Ming's eyes was greatly different from the one in his memories. This place was filled with peace and life. There were countless cultivation planets and essence in them. There was not a single cultivator in this place, only ferocious beasts. It was as if this was an unfamiliar galaxy that had yet to be discovered by cultivators. Su Ming was momentarily stunned. When he instinctively retrieved his divine sense, and the divine sense that had covered the entire galaxy returned to his body, he noticed that the foreign land had disappeared. More accurately speaking, he had become the foreign land. He was the foreign land. Su Ming lowered his head and looked at his own body. He saw a white robe, and he had become a stranger. He was an old man with a head full of white hair and an unfamiliar existence whose eyes were filled with wisdom and age. With one thought, I can destroy the universe. The universe instantly turned dark. The galaxy disappeared in an instant, as if everything had been destroyed. This was not Su Ming's voice, but he felt as if he was the one saying these words. During that instant, he suddenly understood. Once he occupied 8/10 of Akang's Venus pathways, he saw Akang's memories, and once he fused with those memories, he saw Sui Chenzi. With one thought, I am born in the Tao of Heaven. Su Ming's heart trembled. He watched as the galaxy turned into a pitch-black void, and a ray of light was born in the endless darkness. That light instantly spread out and covered everything before Su Ming's eyes. It chased away the darkness, and cultivation planets were born, and lives appeared on them. One thought to extinguish all living things. As the third sentence echoed out, all of the living things in the area seemed to be swept away by flames and transformed into dust. That flame seemed to have existed for tens of thousands of years in this heaven and earth. With one thought, I can give birth to all lives. When the ancient voice spread out once again, Su Ming's heart trembled. He seemed to have come to a vague understanding of something. Those who can see the 4 great divine essence arts of mine either have their stone monuments reach 9 million feet or have possessed 8/10 of Akang. No matter how you did it, as long as you can gain an epiphany from the 4 great divine essence arts, then the laws I left behind will be your laws. The more you understand, the more laws you will be able to control. You only have the span of 3 breaths. 3 breaths later, tell me what your epiphany is. Sui Chunzi said flatly. Happy New Year to all of you. Do you have any other recommendation votes? To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 924. Amidst the sounds of firecrackers, the barking of the 5 dogs, the sound of my daughter playing excitedly, the sound of Intergalactic Baby on the TV, the laughter of my family, and the occasional curious glances and questions from my brothers, sisters, uncles, and aunties, I painfully finished writing 1,000 more words. It's New Year's Eve, and I can't afford to not have a draft prepared. Please recommend it. If you like this work, please come and vote for it. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 925. The First Breath. Su Ming was shaken by the 4 great divine essence arts. In the midst of his confusion, the 4 great divine essence arts echoed before his eyes, and in that short span of a breath, they had repeated themselves hundreds to thousands of times. As the first breath passed, Su Ming suddenly felt that he was no longer Sui Chunzi. He seemed to have seen a layer of black smoke spreading out from the white-robed and white-haired Sui Chunzi's body. There were 100,000 faces within that black smoke, and all of them belonged to Su Ming. When the second breath arrived, Su Ming's 100,000 faces made of black smoke spread out from Sui Chunzi's body. Once they gathered together behind him, Su Ming felt that he had regained a body and was no longer a lost soul in this place. The third breath arrived in an instant. Su Ming looked at Sui Chunzi's back, and the shock he felt from the 4 divine essence arts still appeared in his head. It seemed as if it had fused with his entire life, and he felt that he had come to understand. When the third breath was over, Sui Chunzi, who had his back turned toward Su Ming, looked as if he was shaking his head. He gradually left into the distance, and when Su Ming's body was about to become indistinct once again, he suddenly spoke. My life matrix is the beginning of midwinter. The world is dead, and there is no life force. It is as if a vast expanse of snow has covered the land, and all living beings have died. This is known as one thought to destroy the universe, Su Ming mumbled, and the light of understanding shone in his eyes. After midwinter, my life matrix is bloody autumn. With my blood, I dyed the sky red, turning it into the color of autumn. However, the will of autumn is the transformation between life and death. It is the only realm in my life matrix that contains both life and death at the same time. It is not like the complete stillness of midwinter, nor is it like the vast life force of summer. In the coexistence of life and death, all manner of things will die, and the rebirth of living beings will also appear. This is known as one thought to create the Tao of heaven. Su Ming only spoke in a low whisper, as if he was not talking to anyone but himself. However, Sui Chenzi, who had his back turned towards Su Ming in the distance, froze for a moment when he heard Su Ming's words. He did not move, as if he was thinking about Su Ming's words and waiting for him to continue. The life horoscopes that I've comprehended are moving from death to life, just like moving from midwinter to spring. This is an irreversible cycle of heaven and earth, but this is what my life horoscopes lack. Even if it's irreversible, I have to continue down this path. I was originally confused about the path after the bloody autumn, but now I have gained some enlightenment. The scorching summer after the bloody autumn should be filled with boundless life force. This life force is so hot that it can incinerate anything. This life force is so vast that it can illuminate all living things. This life force seemed real, but in truth, it was fake. However, it was also real. It could burn me, and it could also use its heat to burn all living things in the universe, extinguishing the fire of life in all living things. Perhaps before it is extinguished, it is illusory, but after it is extinguished, it becomes real. Burning summer, burning all living things, igniting one's own life, causing it to become even more majestic. This is what it means to extinguish all living things with a single thought. The sparkle in Su Ming's eyes grew brighter. It was just like how he had gained an epiphany that was different from the others when he was in Eastern Wastelands Tower in the past. He had gained an epiphany that even Sui Chenzi had not expected from the four great divine essence arts. This was an epiphany that belonged solely to Su Ming. Sui Chenzi turned around slowly. At the instant he looked towards Su Ming mumbled his final words. After the scorching summer is spring. The spring when all living things are revived. The spring when all living things rise to power. This should be the first step in life. But to me, this is the final step for me to move from death to life. With the power of spring, I will complete my awakening. If I succeed, then with a single thought, I will give birth to all living things. And if I fail, then with a single thought, I will extinguish all living things. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He lifted his head and looked towards Sui Chenzi. As he looked at the old man with white hair and a wise and ancient look in his eyes, a determined look appeared on Su Ming's face. This is my epiphany. At the instant Su Ming said these words, a slightly strange look appeared on Sui Chenzi's face. He looked as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he did not speak. Instead, there was some sort of epiphany in his eyes, and there was a dazed look on his face. His body gradually disappeared. Almost at the instant Sui Chenzi's body disappeared, the space around him also disappeared. Ikang's low roar reverberated in Su Ming's heart once again. Its powerful will swept through the area, and booming sounds that came crashing into Su Ming's soul could be heard. However, to Su Ming, these sounds felt as if they were incredibly far away from him. At that moment, his soul had already been completely set on fire, but in the midst of it, Su Ming noticed that he had not disappeared. I was a dead person to begin with, and even my soul is a dead soul. What will I become after I die? Su Ming mumbled. It's thought. It's my thought. Su Ming mumbled softly to himself. He remembered when he had first mastered the art of reversing time in Death region, and it was known as the sign of the abyss awakening. When Dao Yuan arrived, and the three seals in Su Ming's soul were broken, the words "this world is built for abyss" appeared in his head, and he could sense that he had truly stepped into the state of the abyss awakening. Only then could he possess the crimson python phoenix in the barren lands of divine essence and form a new physical body. Su Ming might not have known about this possession before, but it had practically become an instinct. The Duke of Crimson Flame once said that the Abyss Builders can resurrect the dead. This is an inborn ability that seizes the serendipity of the world. It is not in harmony with the will of heaven, and neither is it in harmony with the universe. I've always been thinking about where this inborn ability came from. Now I understand. Once the Abyss awakens, the next awakening is the Abyss Builders. Abyss Builders, life builders. So, the Abyss Builders awakening requires dying once truly and completely dying once, Su Ming mumbled. As he came to this understanding, a hint of his soul, which had already dissipated due to burning, appeared once more, and as it swiftly swelled up, it instantly became complete. This form of completion was different from before he had burned his soul, but Su Ming could not tell just what was different. He only felt that he seemed to have obtained some sort of sublimation. It was as if there was life and death in his soul, and it was no longer a simple dead soul. Instead, it was dead with life. It was just like how he had come to understand the will of autumn. It was also at this instant that Su Ming completely understood that he had truly stepped into the will of autumn. Not only had his epiphany reached that state, his soul had also reached that state. From then on, Bright Yang's aura was no longer as terrifying as it was in the past, because Su Ming's soul was no longer a completely dead soul. Instead, it possessed life force, and it hovered between life and death, just like autumn. It was also at this moment that a Kang's enraged roars and disbelieving shock turned real and echoed clearly in the area. There was shock in that voice, as if it was filled with puzzlement and shock towards Su Ming's transformation. Su Ming's soul had already occupied 8/10 of the golden Venus pathways, and it was circling around the heart filled with the aura of death at the center. As Su Ming's bodybuilders awakened and his soul became complete, Su Ming possessed a Kang once again without any hesitation. This time, he was clearly much faster than before. As he fought against the Kang's will, Su Ming also noticed that he seemed to be able to control some power that originally did not belong to him. The power of law, the law Sui Chunzi left behind before he died. When this epiphany rose in his heart, a runic symbol suddenly appeared in the right eye of the 100,000 faces. This runic symbol had not been there before, and now that it had appeared, there was not a single hint of it appearing out of nowhere. At the instant it appeared, the 100,000 runic symbols in the right eyes of the 100,000 faces flew out at the same time. At the instant they shone with an endless amount of black light. All of them turned into a black shadow. Su Ming had seen this shadow before. It was the one who had been able to kill all the people in the world with the 100,000 stone monuments. At that moment, the 100,000 figures appeared, and all of them bowed towards Su Ming. A feeling that he could control them rose clearly in Su Ming's mind as they bowed. Sui Chenzi hoped that a person would appear in the passage of time and successfully possess a Kang, or else he wouldn't have helped me when I was at 3/10, 5/10, and 8/10. At the instant the 100,000 shadows appeared, one thought appeared in Su Ming's mind, and they immediately charged towards the roaring Ikang's will. As they crashed into each other and Ikang's madness and roars reverberated in the air, Su Ming's possession immediately increased from 8/10 to 85. All of the golden Venus pathways that had turned black had already occupied a large area. Besides the heart at the center, there were very few Venus pathways that were still shining with golden light. 86, 88, 90, 91, 92, 93. The 100,000 shadows were formed by the law. As they fought against the king, Su Ming's soul swiftly spread out. As time passed, Su Ming's soul possessed 95 of the Venus pathways. At that moment, besides the golden heart that was filled with the aura of death, all the golden Venus pathways in the area had turned black. All of them belonged to Su Ming. The power of his soul spread out, and the ripples that were stirred up caused the king to let out screams of despair. At that instant, aside from the 90 or so cultivators who had accepted the test but failed at the same time and were chased out, almost all the stone steels in the world of the 100,000 stone steels erupted with powerful light. Besides the small portion of the 100,000 stone monuments that had already surpassed 1 million feet, the remaining 90-something stone monuments shone with a light that reached 100,000 feet. They were so dazzling that they pierced the eyes. As they shone, people with shock and cries of surprise were forced out of their stone monuments. 90,000-something people. These 90,000-something people were the people who wanted to obtain divine essence in the world of the stone monuments and were immersed in their memories. All of them appeared, and this scene shook all the people's hearts. They could not help but be shocked and cry out in surprise. This was something that had never happened since Western Ring Nebula's foreign land was born. What happened? How could this be? I was still in the world of the stone monuments just now, but I was forcefully chased out by a great will that I cannot fight against. Could it be? Could it be that someone managed to reach 1 million feet? That's impossible. There are no stone monuments that are 1 million feet tall here. Look, this are stone monuments. This is... As cries of surprise rang out, and the last voice was especially piercing as it reverberated in the air, all the people were immediately stunned. To their shock, they discovered that besides their own names, another name had suddenly appeared on all their stone monuments. This name was above their own names, as if the person who it represented was the true master of their stone monuments and the true master of the 100,000 stone monuments. The additional name was Mo Su. Zhou Kong stared at Su Ming's stone monument in a daze from the side. He could not help but remember the serious expression on Su Ming's face when he first came to this place and listened to his experiences. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 926. As Zhou Kong looked over, the expressions of the 90-something people who had taken the test to reach 1 million feet and failed at the same time changed drastically. They swiftly looked towards the stone monument they had just discovered, the one that had taken the test with them, but was the only one who had not walked out of the world of the stone monuments. They could clearly remember that that person's name was Mo Su. And at that moment, Mo Su's name had appeared on the near 100,000 stone monuments. This caused their hearts to be in shock, and countless thoughts rose in their hearts. But no matter which one it was enough to make their breathing quicken. They weren't the only ones to notice this. Gradually, more and more people began to gather around them. Moments later, all of the cultivators who had been forced out of the world of the stone steels turned their gazes toward one of the stone steels. That was Mo Su's stone monument. The buzzing sounds slowly disappeared from the land of the 100,000 stone monuments, replaced by dead silence. All the people looked at Su Ming's stone monument, and as their expressions changed, countless thoughts rose in their heads. It was especially so for the people who had chased after Su Ming. Their expressions were incredibly complicated. Perhaps to the others, Mo Su's name and identity were unfamiliar, but they had come to this place for him. If it was not because of the laws in this place, they would have attacked a long time ago. Their understanding towards Su Ming was much greater than the others, but the more it was so, the more complicated their feelings became. As the people in the land of the 100,000 stone monuments fell silent, the king truly panicked the instant Su Ming's soul successfully possessed 95 of the 100,000 Venus pathways in the 100,000 galaxies, 100,000 trees, and 100,000 Venus pathways. In fact, it could be said that it was completely panicking. Its enraged roars brought with them the trembling in its heart, along with the wariness and fear in the depths of its heart, and they continued echoing in the air. Once Su Ming occupied all the golden Venus pathways and turned them black, his soul started possessing the 100,000 identical hearts filled with the aura of death at the center of the 100,000 Venus pathways. Once Su Ming successfully possessed the heart, he would have completed the nearly impossible possession. From then on, there would no longer be a Kang. Only Su Ming's strongest Kang clone. No, you can't do this. You lowly life, you shameless thief, you can't do this. I, a Kang, am a unique existence in the world. I am a living being that stands above the universe. Why do you have to possess me? The Kangs will let out a hysterical roar. Rumbling sounds echoed out, and countless ripples spread out in all directions. The 100,000 starry skies trembled violently, and large amounts of space were torn apart, as if the 100,000 starry skies were about to collapse. The booming sounds came from a Kang's hysterical while clashing violently against Sui Chunzi's 100,000 shadows. The booming sounds were like waves that swept out in all directions. However, it did not matter whether it was a Kang's furious roars or the booming sound in the area. Neither of them could make Su Ming stop for even a single moment. With the 100,000 shadows formed by Sui Chunzi's law fighting against the Kang's will, a Kang could not stop Su Ming at all. As Su Ming's soul spread out, not only did he completely cover all the golden Venus pathways, his soul also surged towards the golden hearts within the Venus pathways in the 100,000 trees in the 100,000 galaxies from all directions. It was like a piece of golden paper. Other than the empty space in the center, the rest of the space was occupied by black ink. At this moment, the endless black ink was rapidly spreading towards the empty space, as if it was going to completely dye the paper black. The 100,000 galaxies roared, the 100,000 trees trembled viciously, and 100,000 roars from a Kang's were reverberated in the air. At the instant Su Ming's soul touched the 100,000 hearts that were filled with the aura of death. At the instant his soul touched the hearts, buzzing sounds appeared once again in Su Ming's soul, followed by 3/10, 5/10, and 8/10 of the Venus pathways, and a new illusory picture appeared once again. When he occupied 3/10 of the Venus pathways, Su Ming saw a Kang's soul and its gigantic body. He felt incredibly shocked, but it was also at that moment that he learned that this person was called a Kang. As time passed, when Su Ming occupied 5/10 of the Venus pathways, the scene he saw caused him to be even more shocked. In fact, despair rose in his heart. There were 100,000 galaxies, 100,000 golden seas, and 100,000 trees. In this scene, Su Ming sensed what was real and what was fake and what was real. Even in the midst of his despair, he did not give up. He continued until his soul successfully occupied 8/10 of all the Venus pathways. During that instant, Su Ming saw Sui Chunzi. He even became Sui Chunzi for a moment. He sensed the four arts of divine essence, verified his life matrix, and controlled Sui Chunzi's law. It could be said that if these three scenes had not appeared in his soul, then it would have been impossible for Su Ming to reach this state that had never been seen before in history. These three illusions in his soul were like three powerful boosts, and they were also like three incredibly great tests. As long as he could pass through them, then he would be able to obtain help. All of this had clearly been left behind by someone beforehand. Their goal was to make it slightly easier for those who came later to possess a Kang, but it was only slightly easier. If Su Ming had not done all these things, then even if he had these 3 times of help, he would not have been able to reach this point. It was clear that the person who left these things behind was Sui Chunzi. At that moment, as the scenes in his soul appeared, Su Ming knew clearly that this was the 4th time, and there was a high possibility that this would be the last time. Booming sounds rang out in Su Ming's soul. As they continued, he saw a shattered sky. That galaxy was boundless. Su Ming did not know just how big it was, But he had a vague feeling that this was a true world, a complete true world whose size could not be described with words. It might not be able to describe its size, but could be compared to the four great true worlds Su Ming knew of. It was also a true world, yet at that moment, it was damaged everywhere. Booming sounds that sounded as if the sky was collapsing and the earth was cracking echoed in Su Ming's heart. They did not stop, and they were becoming even more intense. When Su Ming cast his gaze over, he saw that the countless planets in the boundless galaxy were swiftly falling apart and turning into powder. The countless lives within them were also turning into ashes one after another during that instant. It was as if the galaxy was dying, the planets were being destroyed, and all the lives were returning to dust. Everything in the galaxy had reached its end at that moment, just like the lives of people. They were swiftly moving toward the dead end. Even cultivation planets that were brimming with life a breath ago were immediately surrounded by the aura of death and turned into ashes the next breath, causing the entire galaxy to be instantly filled with a thick aura of death. Even the final expanse cosmos under the universe cannot escape death. So I, Sui Chunzi, am still powerless to fight against it. I'd have failed. An ancient voice reverberated in the galaxy with a thick wave of grief. Su Ming saw Sui Chunzi in white robes walking towards death. His hair was a mess as he threw his head back and laughed long and hard at the sky. However, when that laughter fell into Su Ming's ears, he could clearly hear an indescribable sadness. But I also succeeded. As Sui Chunzi laughed long and sorrowful laughter, Su Ming stared at Sui Chunzi in a daze. He saw a shard falling off Sui Chunzi's face, and then an endless amount of shards fell off Sui Chunzi's body. He looked as if he was formed by an endless amount of shards, and as they fell off, his body was swiftly crumbling to pieces. When I die, this expanse cosmos will turn to dust. When I close my eyes, the universe will lose its light. Those who inherit my divine essence must remember the scene of my death. Remember that the Tao of heaven will fall, and that the universe will have no thoughts. I failed, and that is why I died, but I also succeeded, and that is why I have given you hope. As Sui Chunzi laughed long and hard, his body turned into an endless amount of fragments with a bang, turning into a whirlwind. When spread out, Su Ming immediately saw that only his heart remained in Sui Chunzi's crumbling body. It was a golden heart, and when Su Ming looked at it, he felt as if he was looking at a world. This was an indescribable feeling, and the only time Su Ming had experienced something similar in his life was when he saw the world stone in Crimson Flame Planet. At that time, he felt as if he was looking at an endless amount of living beings. However, the feeling he had at that moment was much stronger than when he saw the world stone. In fact, the intensity of the two feelings was so great that it was practically impossible to compare them. It was like the light of a bright sun and a firefly. Su Ming was shocked by this scene. He looked at the heart in the whirlwind, and suddenly he did not know whether it was just a figment of his imagination, but he saw a seed on the heart. That seed had 10 different colors, and it was hidden in the golden light. Before Su Ming could take a closer look at it, as Sui Chunzi's body completely spread out, the galaxy and the universe tumbled backwards and charged towards the golden heart. As they tumbled backwards, the galaxy and the universe were continuously destroyed. The laws crumbled and disappeared, lives died, planets died, and time fell into chaos as it tumbled backwards and gathered together. In fact, the memories of countless lives before they died turned into incomplete wills that turned into an invisible windstorm in the dying galaxy. When the true world and the past completely gathered together in Su Ming's eyes and surged into the golden heart, the galaxy around him turned into a void without any signs of life. Boom! Su Ming saw with his own eyes that the golden heart that had gathered together a true world turned into a gigantic vortex. There were countless cracks around that vortex, and it looked exactly like Western Ring Nebula's foreign land. Before Su Ming's shock could fade away, The scene he saw next caused his soul to be filled with a shock that surpassed all the shock he felt when he saw 3/10, 5/10, and 8/10 of what he saw previously. He saw a gigantic tree that towered into the sky in the vortex. With a great presence, madness, ferociousness, and a mighty pressure that surpassed Sui Chunzi's, it was born in the vortex formed by Sui Chunzi's death. In an instant, its size surpassed that of the vortex. It was as if the tree was devouring the vortex as its nutrients and divine essence so that it could grow. The tree surpassed the Ikang Su Ming saw, but it was clearly Ikang. However, its color was not pure purple. Instead, it had all 10 colors. At the same time, a sound like the sound of a newborn baby sprouting could be heard from within the tree. Ikang. Song. There were only 2 indistinct syllables, but there was a terror that made it seem as if with just one thought, it could destroy Su Ming tens of thousands of times, causing his heart to tremble. It was strong, indescribably strong. It was the strongest in the universe, and in fact, it had surpassed the strongest in the universe. The complete Ikang. Su Ming's pupils shrank as he mumbled, requesting recommendation tickets to be continued. If you like this work, please come to Start Point and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 927. This was Ikang, which had just been born. Su Ming looked at Ikang, which had been born through Sui Chunzi's death and the destruction of his body, as well as Sui Chunzi's universe, as if it had absorbed a sufficient amount of nourishment. He looked at its 10 colors, its endless light, and its indescribably mighty appearance. At that instant, Su Ming felt as if he had stopped thinking. He had originally thought that Ikang had an incredibly great background, but he still did not expect that its origins would be much more mysterious than he had imagined. I'm possessing such a powerful living being, Su Ming mumbled. If he had known that Ikang was so unimaginable, he did not know whether he would have had the willpower to choose to possess it. Fortunately, what he possessed was not the complete Ikang. It was only 1/10 of it, and by the looks of it, it was also heavily injured. Otherwise, Su Ming believed that even if it was just 1/10 of the complete Ikang, he would definitely not have been able to successfully possess it. But it's already so strong that it's unimaginable. Just who could injure it so badly that the complete Ikang would be torn apart? In the midst of Su Ming's shock, a question immediately rose in his heart. At the instant this question appeared in his mind, Su Ming saw the answer. He saw Ikang, which was letting out a voice that sounded like it was just born, growing several hundreds of times larger in an instant. When he looked over, he could not see its end. It was as if half of the entire space had been occupied by it. Yet suddenly, an ancient voice that Su Ming was familiar with came from within the Ikang tree's body. With one thought, the universe with one thought, the Tao of heaven with one thought, all manner of living, all manner of things, that voice belonged to Sui Chunzi, whose body had already been destroyed and only his heart was left. His voice shot through the Ikang tree and reverberated in space. There was a sense of carefreeness and determination in his voice, and it did not disappear even after a long time had passed. At the same time, Ikang's gigantic body started trembling viciously. As the 10-colored light shone brilliantly, its body could no longer continue growing. Pained cries that sounded like the cries of a baby came from the Ikang tree. Perhaps before long, it would be able to grow into an incredibly terrifying existence once it devoured Sui Chunzi's divine essence, but had just been born. It might be complete, but it was like a baby and had yet to fully grow. Its shrill scream spread through the area and fell into Su Ming's ears. This scene caused his breathing to quicken. Before, I couldn't kill you. All I could do was let you live in my soul and let you destroy me. I knew that you would be born the moment I died. I might not be able to kill you, but the moment you were born, you became me and I became you. I won't walk the same path as my 8 friends. Instead, I will use 100,000 years of preparation to seriously injure you. With a single thought, 1,000,000 lives. When Sui Chunzi's voice reached the end, it suddenly grew stronger. As his voice echoed in the air, Ikang's pained roars became even more intense. Countless cracks also appeared on its body at that instant. It collapsed from the inside with a loud bang, transformed into 1,000,000 copies. The golden heart formed by Sui Chunzi's divine essence turned into 1,000,000 copies as well. During that instant, it turned into 1,000,000 hearts. At the same time, Ikang, which had been shattered into 1,000,000 pieces, had 100,000 pieces of each color. At that moment, as it shattered, it was suppressed and sealed by the 1,000,000 golden hearts. A loud bang that shook the entire space reverberated in the air. The foreign land was still the foreign land, but the 1,000,000 pieces of Ikang fell backwards and were swept into the foreign land before disappearing without a trace. I failed, that's why I died, but I also succeeded. I left behind a chance for my descendants to break through the disaster of divine essence. If my descendants can obtain my divine essence, then remember this. When Sui Chunzi's voice gradually faded away, Su Ming was shocked by what he saw. However, the truth that he saw did not disappear. Instead, a new change occurred. Su Ming saw time flowing by. After an unknown number of cycles of 60 years passed, a faint roar came from the foreign land. That roar was filled with an unwillingness to admit defeat and madness, along with a monstrous hate. Sui Chunzi, you old coot, you still can't kill me, and neither can you suppress me forever. I've already been born, and my life is already in this universe. It is destined that I will walk out of your seal. Even if you split my body into 10 parts and gave birth to 10 wills, there will come a day when my 10 wills will fuse together once again. At that time, I, Ikang, will appear in the world. Even if you manage to injure me gravely, your divine essence is still around. Since you set the rule for your descendants to obtain your divine essence before you died, then I can also use this to turn this place into the source for Ikang's recovery. The more people come to this place to obtain your divine essence, the more they will help me heal. All their epiphanies, all their cultivation bases, and all their lives will belong to me. As his voice echoed in the air, everything before Su Ming's eyes disappeared. He woke up from the picture in his soul. His soul had covered all the golden Venus pathways, and at that moment, it had fused into the golden heart in the 100,000 galaxies. His possession had increased from 9,500ths to 9,700ths. So this is the truth. Su Ming remembered Zhou Kong saying that his wife had once guessed that this place was a scam. By the looks of it now, this scam was not set up by Sui Chunzi, but had been used by Ikang to turn this place into its current state. It doesn't matter what the truth is. It doesn't matter whether this place is a scam or not. What's important is, I possessed 97. My Ikang clone is about to succeed. Su Ming's soul spread out furiously and fused into the golden heart. With the 100,000 shadows formed by Sui Chunzi's rule blocking Ikang's will, Su Ming's progress was incredibly smooth. When Su Ming's possession reached 9,800ths from the previous 97, Ikang went completely mad. It let out a hysterical roar, and a wave of despair and madness appeared within it. You forced me to do this. You forced me to do all of this. I will absolutely not let you succeed in possessing me. Even if I lose the chance to devour the 9 of them because of this, even if I will completely lose my will and only have a portion of my soul left that could be devoured by the 9 of them at will, I will absolutely not let you possess my noble Ikang body. Ikang laughed madly. There was determination in that laughter, along with the will to die together with Su Ming. Great Ikang art. At the instant Ikang said those words, shrill screams of pain immediately came from the near 100,000 people in the world with the 100,000 stone monuments. As the screams of pain reverberated in the air, the people in the area looked over in shock. They saw a middle-aged man's body rapidly rotting away. Spots of purple light spread out from his body, and they were swiftly absorbed by his stone monument. In the blink of an eye, the middle-aged cultivator's body disappeared, and not a single trace of him remained. Soon after, Screams of pain rang out once again. As they rose and fell, nearly 10,000 people screamed shrilly in pain. Their bodies were rapidly disappearing, and they were all absorbed by their stone monuments. At that moment, after absorbing the flesh, blood, life, and everything else from nearly 10,000 people, large amounts of cracks appeared on the stone steels. Cracking sounds could be heard, and nearly 10,000 stone steels shattered into pieces. Violet chi spread out from within them, and as the shattered stone steels shot through the air, they disappeared from the land of 100,000 stone steels. From now on, there would only ever be 90,000 stone steels. At the same time, Ecangsville increased exponentially. Wisps of purple smoke appeared out of nowhere from all directions. There were nearly 10,000 wisps of that purple smoke, and it was the same number as the cultivators who had the aura of death. As that purple smoke swiftly gathered together, it turned into a gigantic purple tree. That tree was naturally Kang's soul. Song. At the instant its soul appeared, the purple tree let out a low roar. At the instant it uttered the word the 100,000 shadows formed by the laws shuddered simultaneously and instantly stopped moving. When the word song spread out, without the 100,000 shadows resisting it, Su Ming's soul, which was currently possessing the golden heart in the 100,000 Venus pathways, immediately suffered a powerful impact. I sacrificed an incredibly great price in exchange for the laws to stop. This price is that from now on, I will no longer be able to recover. I can only watch as the 9 of them continue recovering and wait for one of them to wake up and devour me. I've sacrificed so much, and if I still can't kill you, then I won't be able to accept this. Ecangsville rushed towards Su Ming in a frenzy. At the instant it crashed into his soul, Su Ming executed the final part of his plan, which he had prepared for hundreds of years for this possession, without any hesitation. Black fragment. Su Ming's soul let out a low growl. The black fragment had been with Su Ming in Death region, had hidden itself in his soul, and had followed him to the barren lands of divine essence. At that moment, as Su Ming summoned it, it gathered in his soul. There was something strange about this item. Even if Su Ming's soul had been burnt to a crisp, it still existed in his soul. At that moment, when it gathered together, it immediately turned into its original form, an inconspicuous black fragment. Deceive it. At the instant the black fragment appeared, it was also the instant Ecangsville appeared. As booming sounds reverberated in the air, the 100,000 golden Venus pathways and the 100,000 trees and the 100,000 galaxies had originally only 100,000 golden hearts, but at that moment, their numbers increased exponentially by 1,000 times. 1,000 golden hearts appeared in each of the 100,000 golden Venus pathways, and when they were added together, it meant that there were more than 100 million hearts made of the aura of death in the 100,000 golden Venus pathways. Among these 100 million hearts, only 100,000 were real. The rest were all fake, but when it came to the feeling, these hearts were exactly the same. There was not a hint of difference between them. This was the strange power that the black fragment was most skilled in. It could deceive all manner of lives. Su Ming did not know how long he could deceive a Kang with this treasure, which was why he did not dare to use it previously. Instead, at this moment, when he was the closest to success, and the value of each breath at that moment far surpassed what it had been previously, he used it as his final resort. This is the seed of life, extermination. Did it fail as well? This is impossible. How could it fail? How could there only be a fragment left? There was disbelief in Kang's voice, along with deep despair. It needed 10 breaths before it could find the real Su Ming among the 100 million hearts. If these 10 breaths were in the past, then it would have been nothing, but at this critical moment, these 10 breaths would decide the outcome of the battle. I failed. The wills of the 9 who were separated from me have been possessed. Destroy it and take revenge for me. As Kang's despairing voice echoed in the air, Su Ming's possession of the true 100,000 golden hearts had increased from 98% to 99%, and then to 100%. The golden Venus pathways and the golden hearts had all turned black at that moment. Requesting recommendation votes to be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 928. Complete Possession. At the instant Su Ming possessed 100th of the tree, Ikang's will withered away, and in the blink of an eye, it disappeared without a trace. It was completely replaced by Su Ming's soul, causing the purple Ikang tree to become Su Ming's clone from then on. It was also at that instant that Su Ming completely possessed the tree that waves of vast and ancient memories surged into his soul like a tidal wave. The memories were incredibly jumbled up, causing Su Ming's soul to immediately feel as if it was swelling up. Stabbing pain filled his soul, as if it was being branded deeply into his soul by the memories. The pain was difficult to describe with words, but at the same time, Su Ming could sense that his soul was swiftly becoming stronger. As the memories gathered together and his soul continued becoming stronger, he could sense his level of cultivation going through a drastic change. He seemed to have understood the changes in the world in an instant. The places where his thoughts had been blocked off in the past were all opened up at that instant. The 100,000 galaxies, the 100,000 golden seas, and the 100,000 Ikang trees and the 100,000 planets shuddered at the same time. At the instant Su Ming sensed that he had become Ikang, he immediately sensed that there were many more galaxies beyond the 100,000 galaxies in the universe. There were 9 wills that did not lose to him in those galaxies. Each of them contained the power of 100,000 galaxies, and at that moment, they were gathering together and surrounding the 100,000 galaxies that belonged to Su Ming. They looked as if they wanted to charge towards him, but were lingering around. There was no need for Su Ming to think too much about it. He could already tell that the 9 wills lingering around the area were the remaining 9 parts of the Ikang tree after it had split up. In the past, when Ikang had split into 10 parts, they had used Western Ring Nebula's foreign land to heal themselves. If Su Ming had not appeared, then perhaps after a long period of time had passed, they would have devoured each other and gathered together to form the true Ikang. Yet now, as Su Ming appeared and successfully possessed the purple Ikang, the ripples of power that spread out from the purple Ikang before it died caused the other 9 wills to arrive and devour him beforehand. If Su Ming was interrupted during the critical moment before he could form his clone and was devoured by the other 9 wills, then even if he possessed the purple Ikang, he would still not gain any benefits from it. He would only end up as one of the true Ikang souls. Originally, the 9 wills would have instantly spread to the 100,000 galaxies of the purple Ikang and carry out a brutal devouring and fusion process. When the purple Ikang Su Ming possessed was completely devoured, the 9 wills would have become much stronger. In fact, before the purple Ikang died, it had sent a divine thought to the other 9 wills. This was what it had originally planned to do, because it had once made a promise with the other 9 Ikang souls. Before the 10 of their souls had completely recovered, they would not devour each other. They would only devour each other once they were complete. If that was the case, they would be able to give birth to a true Ikang that was completely unharmed and even stronger. That was why if the purple Ikang's divine thought did not exist, the other 9 Ikang souls would not have come. However, even the purple Ikang Su Ming possessed did not expect that Su Ming's possession would not wipe out the other party's soul in the traditional sense. He would only possess the other party's body, which was why it had miscalculated. This sort of traditional possession would cause the other 9 wills to reject Su Ming violently, and they would immediately rush in to devour him. However, Su Ming's possession was an abyss builder's inborn ability. This sort of possession did not just require the body, but also the soul. In fact, he would also need to obtain the brand of life. He would need to gather together a new body from within the purple Ikang's body. It did not matter whether it was the presence of that body or all signs of life. they would completely belong to a king. It was just like how, when Su Ming possessed one of the 3 crimson python phoenixes in the past, the other 2 had not noticed him. Instead, they had always believed that Su Ming was their companion. In fact, their presences had not even changed. This was the Abyss Builder's possession. It was also the key to the Purple Akang's failure, even if it died. More accurately speaking, the Abyss Builder's possession was divided into 3 steps. The first step was to pass off the fake as the real one. This was the initial stage of possession, and it could be seen as the invasion of the soul, just like the Purple Akang just now and the Crimson Python Phoenix devouring Su Ming's soul in the past. The fake here was referring to Su Ming's soul, and the real here was referring to the other party's body and mind. The second step was to steal the sky and replace the sun. He would completely possess the other party's body, mind, and even the brand of life. In fact, once he possessed the other party's life matrix and made it his own, it would be as if he had replaced the sun and moon in the sky. At that moment, Su Ming was in the process of completing this step. Once he successfully possessed the other party, he would replace the sun and moon in the sky. The main point was to replace them, not wipe them out. That was why there was the third step, turning something rotten into something magical. The rotten symbolized the past, and the magical symbolized the future. The change between the rotten and the magical was like a rebirth. With the rotting of the past, the magical would be reborn. This step was what Su Ming was prepared to do at that moment. From a certain point of view, there was not much difference between Su Ming and Akang. In fact, to a certain extent, they were the same. Akang used Sui Chunzi's death to be born and devour divine essence. Su Ming was reborn from Akang's body and absorbed what Akang absorbed. He also devoured everything that belonged to Akang. In fact, if he looked at it from another angle, the Abyss Builders were even more domineering than Akang. Because you devoured the universe's divine essence to be born, and I devoured Akang's life to live, Su Ming mumbled. Su Ming mumbled, as the chaotic memories in his soul continued being branded into his mind like a storm. Su Ming gained an even deeper understanding towards the Abyss Builder's inborn ability to possess others. After all, since ancient times, he was the only one among the Abyss Builders who could devour Akang, a unique life form in the universe like Su Ming. Abyss Builders are like small fishes that eat shrimps to live, but big fishes eat small fishes to live. The strong prey on the weak. I didn't expect that these words would be displayed so vividly in the Abyss Builder's inborn ability. The black Venus pathways and the black hearts in the 100,000 purple Akang trees turned into 100,000 Su Ming's faces at that moment. As he mumbled to himself, he also found the reason why the other 9 Akang wills were lingering outside. To them, my presence is not much different from the purple Akangs, but since I haven't completed the third step, there are some differences. That's why they might be lingering around hesitantly, but they won't leave. This phenomenon will continue until I complete the third step of possession and turn something rotten into something extraordinary. Only then will it end. The eyes of the 100,000 Su Ming faces shone at the same time, and a freezing glare shone in them. I need time. It might not be a long time, but might be a long time. Besides, my soul will fall into deep sleep. After all, the purple Akang is not like the crimson python phoenix, which can instantly form clones. The purple Akang is too big. During this period of time, whether it will be a long or short one, these 9 wills will be a latent threat. If they continue lingering around, I won't be able to bet my life on them not coming to devour me. Fortunately, I have the black stone fragment. By the looks of it, the seed of life extermination mentioned by the purple Akang seems to have come from the same era as the bald crane. That's why Akang said the word also just now. I actually failed as well. Once I possess the purple Akang, the secrets of the ancient era and Sui Chunzi's era will slowly appear in my world. At this moment, I no longer have Death Region's wills manipulating me, and I no longer have Dtion's plans and control me. From now on, I will be myself. The only thing I need to be wary of is that Tion will not be willing to accept his plan to spy on us abyss builders failing. Since he can't control my soul, then he will definitely choose to use all his strength to plant his roots in my physical body, which is currently in the land of the immortals. Because he knows that my physical body is my foundation. In the end, I will retrieve my physical body. Protecting my physical body is the same as having a hold on my Achilles heel. But my physical body is my Achilles heel, and it is also Tion's Achilles heel. At that moment, Su Ming was different from before. This difference was like a fish returning to the sea, like a tiger returning to the forest, like a dragon returning to the clouds. It was a form of confidence and presence that would naturally appear when no one else controlled his own fate, and when he had control over himself. At that moment, Su Ming was the real Su Ming. As he mumbled softly to himself, the black stone fragment erupted with a bang. Based on Su Ming's will, it immediately manifested the purple Akang's soul and presence to make up for the fact that Su Ming had yet to complete the third step in his possession. That was why his soul and presence were slightly lacking, and Su Ming sent his divine thought outwards. Some cultivators tried to possess me and almost succeeded, but in the end, they still failed. I am still me. The promise between our souls is still in effect. Now, stay away from my 100,000 galaxies. We have not reached the final stage of devouring and fusing with each other. As Su Ming's divine thought and the presence of Akang's soul formed by the black stone fragment spread out violently, the 9 wills of Akang's soul lingering around the 100,000 galaxies gradually dissipated. After a moment, they disappeared from Su Ming's senses. As the 9 wills of Akang's soul disappeared, the edges of the 100,000 galaxies where Su Ming was started showing signs of fusing with each other. 100,000 galaxies were gradually turning into one. At the same time, the 100,000 Akang trees that had been separated into 100,000 started showing signs of gathering together. Su Ming's soul gradually sank into deep sleep. When I wake up again, I can sense that my other clone will become even stronger. My level of cultivation will surpass my current level of cultivation. This Akang clone of mine will become my strongest foundation in the future. I look forward to the time when I wake up, and I will be different from before. Su Ming mumbled. The 100,000 faces with the black Venus pathways slowly closed their eyes. A fusion, a rebirth, a serendipity, and the final gathering of an Akang clone began just like that. Please recommend me. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 9:29. 10 years later. 10 years was not a long time. In fact, cultivators who had lived for a long time would usually only need to meditate for a short period of time. They could squander away their time as they pleased, regardless of whether it was 10 years, 100 years, or even more. This was something that mortals envied and yearned for. Perhaps immortality was the reason why mortals longed to become cultivators, but it was definitely not the only reason. Besides immortality, being able to squander away time without wasting was also a reason why mortals longed to become cultivators. To a normal mortal, 10 years might not be a lifetime, but it was a reminiscence. 10 years ago, perhaps there was a person by their side. 10 years ago, perhaps they were still an ambitious teenager. 10 years ago, perhaps they did not know how to treasure it. 10 years ago, perhaps they were still happy and laughing foolishly without a care in the world. But 10 years later, they would only look at the blue sky and white clouds, watch the sun set and rise, and sigh that they were still a normal person. 10 years could change mortals, but it could not change many cultivators. However, it could make a memory gradually become buried in the depths of their hearts. It was like the movements of zither strings. If there was no one playing them, they would not make a single sound. The shock they felt 10 years ago in the land of 100,000 stone monuments was now like this. It turned into a thought that the people in the area did not want to talk about. However, As these thoughts gathered in their eyes, they would occasionally look warily at a stone monument with Su's name carved on it. It was a stone monument that was 1 million feet tall. 10 years ago, 10,000 of the 100,000 stone monuments had shattered, and 10,000 of the 100,000 cultivators had died. It had shaken the entire foreign land, and everyone was shocked. 10 years later, while that shock might have been buried in the depths of their hearts, Su's stone monument, the only stone monument that had survived the disaster 10 years ago, had attracted far too many gazes during those 10 years. Some of those gazes belonged to Zhou Kong, some belonged to those who had chased after Su Ming, and some belonged to the other people of the area. Perhaps they were not stubbornly waiting, or perhaps they were not too curious. However, the intensity of the calamity 10 years ago had caused them to simultaneously guess that the calamity was closely related to Su's stone tablet. They were subconsciously waiting for Su, who had not appeared for 10 years. Perhaps at that time, they would be able to find the cause of the calamity 10 years ago. During these 10 years, half of the 100,000 galaxies where the purple Akang's body was had lost their boundaries and had fused together. Su Ming continued sleeping, and he showed no signs of waking up. Another 10 years passed. The 100,000 stars had completely fused together. The next step was the fusion of the 100,000 hearts that had been dyed black. When Su Ming fell asleep for 60 years, the people in the land of the 90,000 stone monuments gradually became used to Su Ming's stone monuments, standing tall for a long period of time. They were used to the fact that their owners had never walked out of their stone monuments. They were used to the fact that the 100,000 stone monuments that had originally been there for 60 years had become 90,000. In fact, during the 60 years, there were thousands of newcomers who did not know about the disaster 60 years ago. The first thing they saw was the 90,000 stone monuments, and they had always believed that there had always been 90,000 stone monuments in this place. During the 60 years, the 100,000 galaxies in Su Ming's world fused together to form an incredibly huge galaxy. The 100,000 black hearts also gradually finished gathering together, and from the 100,000 of them, they turned into a single existence that floated in the gigantic galaxy. However, Su Ming continued sleeping, because what followed was the fusion of the 100,000 Akangs. The 100,000 purple Akangs would gather together to form its gigantic body. Another cycle of 60 years passed, a total of 120 years. 10 years was like a memory, while 100 years was like a legend. The legend was like that to mortals, but to cultivators, in this unique and monotonous land of 90,000 stone tablets, the scene from 100 years ago would gradually fade away as they entered the world of the stone tablets again and again, causing the stone tablets to grow and attempting to make the stone tablets grow to 1 million feet tall. Nothing had changed. Even though the 100,000 stone monuments had turned into 90,000, there was still the test of 1 million feet and the journey of memories in the worlds of the stone monuments. When another 60 years passed, there were only a few people who could remember Su Ming. However, Zhou Kong was one of them. He still could not forget Su Ming, could not forget the person who had loved silence and helped him take revenge in exchange for teaching him his experiences. When the fourth cycle of 60 years came to an end, 240 years of the fourth cycle of 60 years flowed by. In Su Ming's world, an incredibly huge tree that towered into the sky gathered around the black heart in the gigantic galaxy. That tree occupied most of the galaxy. It exuded an ancient air, and its entire body was purple. There was an indescribable mighty pressure coming from it. It was the only true existence in the galaxy at that moment. If anyone took a closer look, they would be able to see that there was golden light contained within the purple tree. At first glance, it might seem purple, but in truth, it was the fusion of purple and gold. Purple was its root, and gold was its source. At the instant the purple tree's body completely gathered together, purple light surged into the heavens. Once it illuminated the entire galaxy, its body gradually shrank. This was not a simple shrinkage. but a form of contraction. It was a form of rebirth that was in a state of being in a state of almost withering but not withered. It was as if there was a life about to be born in its trunk. The birth of this life required the tree's nutrients, which was why as this life continued gathering life force, the tree shrank. This process lasted for 60 years. 300 years had passed since Su Ming fell asleep. It was enough for the people in the land with the 90,000 stone monuments to forget the disaster in the past. It was also enough for the gazes that usually fell on Su Ming's stone monument to be reduced to only one. That gaze belonged to Zhou Kong. During the 300 years, he had made his stone monument reach 900,000-something feet multiple times. He had gone through multiple tests, but he had failed all of them. However, this was no longer the main focus of his life. At that moment, he had been paying attention to Su Ming's stone monument because he wanted to see whether his deceased wife's guess in the past was correct. Because he, who had already reached the later stage of world plane realm, had long since understood that while he was immersed in his memories, everything was fake. They were all things that belonged to the past. Only his wife's guess was real. Su Ming was not related to him, but he was the one who had pointed out the path Su Ming took. The path Su Ming took was based on his wife's guess and conclusion in the past. Even if his wife had already died, this was the only thing that allowed Zhou Kong to last until then. Another 10 years passed. When the 310th year was about to pass, no one in the world of the 90,000 stone tablets noticed that a change and difference had quietly existed in their world. This change came from Su Ming's world. He opened his eyes. In Su Ming's world was a vast galaxy. At that moment, the tree was no longer around. What existed in the galaxy was a young man with long black hair and black eyes. His black hair reached his feet, and his face was so pale that he looked sick. However, there was a vast life force within him that could suffocate others. It was swirling about in the young man's body like a storm. During the 500 cycles of 60 years, Su Ming had finally completed the third step of Abyss Builder's possession. He had turned something rotten into something miraculous and formed his clone from the Akang tree. This would be the first clone to possess a life form like Akang in the endless years of the universe. This was something that had never happened before. This clone was not within the laws of the universe. It had transcended the laws of the universe. This was Su Ming's strongest clone. This was Akang's clone. He opened his eyes. At the instant Su Ming opened his eyes, the entire galaxy trembled as if it was submitting to him. Countless cracks appeared on it, as if with just one thought, this galaxy would crumble and shatter. There was an endless amount of golden light in his eyes. There were also overlapping shadows of runic symbols in his right eye. That shadow replaced his pupils and exuded an indescribable, awe-inspiring might. If anyone looked into his eyes, then at that instant, a loud bang would ring in their hearts, and they would be torn to shreds. Su Ming, who had mastered a tenth of Sui Chunzi's divine essence and gathered together a tenth of Akang's complete form, possessed a power that surpassed his imagination at the instant his clone was formed. Perhaps more accurately speaking, this was no longer a cultivation base, but an instinct to control divine essence. I don't know how strong this clone is, but I have a feeling that I am the master of the 100,000 galaxies in this place. No matter how many existences at the peak of the middle stage of world plane realm, like Zhao family's progenitor, appear, this clone of mine can instantly wipe them off. Perhaps I can even fight against the ancient will in Yin Death region. But this is just for now. I can sense a strong feeling that this body is like a newborn baby. It is still growing, and with each breath, it will become stronger. As Su Ming mumbled softly to himself, the golden light in his eyes was as brilliant as the sun. From now on, none of the stone monuments in the world of the 90,000 stone monuments will ever be able to reach 10 million feet. 9 million feet will be their limit, because 100,000 of these 10 million feet will forever belong to me alone. A faint smile appeared on Su Ming's face. He lifted his right hand and swung it before him. Immediately, A layer of distorted ripples appeared in the galaxy before him. Those ripples spread outwards, and after a moment, a body appeared out of thin air amid those distortions. It gradually floated towards Su Ming. This was Su Ming's Crimson Python Phoenix clone. It was also his first physical clone who had practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. It can clone, I cultivate divine essence. Clone that practices the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole, I cultivate my physical body. Immortals, my real self, cultivate my soul. I still need a clone to cultivate my epiphany. Now, this clone of mine that practices the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole should become stronger. Golden light shone in Su Ming's eyes, and he pointed at his clone with his right index finger. I am the master of the galaxy that fused with 100,000 galaxies. With just one thought, this body of mine will become stronger, Su Ming said softly. At the instant he finished speaking, laws and laws appeared in the vast galaxy, and all of them gathered on Su Ming's clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. When Su Ming's clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole opened his eyes, waves of powerful presence erupted from his body like a rising tide. Dear, the update will resume tomorrow. Seeking recommendation votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 9:30. Due to the Duke of Crimson Flame's race's peerless physical body art, Su Ming's clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole had gone through one of the 9 disasters. From then on, his physical body had become a paragon, and he had stepped into World Plane Realm. However, he was only in the initial stage of World Plane Realm. He needed to devour more power of world planes before he could go through the next few disasters. Only then could his body continue becoming stronger. However, the further he progressed in the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole, the more difficult it would be to practice. More importantly, before Su Ming stepped into Western Ring Nebula's foreign land, it had been inconvenient for him to continue devouring the power of world planes, because once he attained completion for the second time, his soul would completely fuse with his physical body, causing the Abyss Builder's inborn ability to create clones to disappear. In fact, his soul would not be able to fuse with his real physical body in the land of immortals. Su Ming had thought about it before. If he truly could not find a suitable spirit to possess, then he would randomly choose one to possess. After all, he could not stop his cultivation base because of this. There might be a lot of drawbacks to this sort of random choice, but he had to do it. Yet now, the matter that had made Su Ming hesitate in the past had been perfectly resolved. Even though his Akang clone was not the clone he had originally wanted to gain an epiphany of his cultivation base, the divine essence cultivated by his Akang body had surpassed Su Ming's expectations, turning into a serendipity that could change his entire life. During this serendipity, he had broken free of the control of Indeth Region's will and freed himself of the seal Tion had hidden deep within him. To Su Ming, this was not any less than obtaining his Akang clone. Besides, now that he had the Akang clone, Su Ming could split his soul. Because of that, he could completely fuse with the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole, so that he could continue his journey through the 9 tribulations. As these thoughts flashed in Su Ming's head, he looked at his clone, and the clone was also looking at him. When their gazes met, a feeling as if they were in perfect harmony rose within him. This was a very mysterious feeling. It was as if a person had 2 bodies. Perhaps this analogy was not quite appropriate, but at that moment, Su Ming felt as if these 2 clones had become his left and right hands. His soul was his brain, and his control over them was incredibly natural. There is not a hint of rudeness in his movements. This clone should become stronger, Su Ming mumbled. At the same time, his clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole opened his mouth and said the same thing as Su Ming. Laws surrounded him and filled the area. As Su Ming spoke, the galaxy roared. Violent sounds spread in all directions, causing the galaxy to tremble. A planet could be vaguely seen. This star was golden in color. Then the second, the third, the fourth, all the way to 10,000. Once the 100,000 galaxies fused together, the purple Akang was not the only thing that gathered together. The 100,000 golden planets did not turn into one, but turned into a golden galaxy formed by 100,000 planets. The light from the galaxy was endless, and there was a hint of purple within the golden light. At the instant it illuminated the entire galaxy, Su Ming's Akang clone swung his right hand forward casually. 100,000 rivers of stars, 100,000 primordial stars in my sky, awaken your essence. At the instant Su Ming finished speaking, the presence of the essence of the world erupted with a bang from the 100,000 planets in the river of 100,000 planets. The 100,000 presences fused together and covered the sky and earth. At the instant they shook the galaxy, Su Ming spoke again. The power of world planes is born in the essence of the world. Boom! A vast amount of power of world planes erupted from the 100,000 galaxies. It was so thick that it could not be described with words, and it instantly charged towards Su Ming's clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. In the blink of an eye, it surged into his body through every inch of his skin. As the power of world planes gathered together, the hair of Su Ming's clone moved without wind, and waves of powerful presence swiftly increased exponentially in his body. Absorb as much as you want. Now that I have become the master of 100,000 galaxies, I will no longer be manipulated by anyone. Su Ming lifted his head and looked at the 100,000 galaxies while speaking softly. His face was pale. Runic symbols overlapped in his right eye, but there was an ancient look in his left eye. As the presence of the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole continued rising, and as the power of world planes born from the essence of the world continued fused into him, it soon reached the second state of completion in the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. From now on, this clone will become the strongest body I have in my life based on the power of Qi. If each of my clones can become the strongest, then in the end, once I fuse with them, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Boom! Once the clone reached the second state of completion, he took a step forward. The second disaster descended, causing a hint of a presence that did not belong to this place to appear in the 100,000 galaxies. This presence that did not belong to Su Ming came from within the clone. It was just like the first disaster in the past. Besides the last three disasters, the Duke of Crimson Flame's race's art of swallowing hollow shadows whole were born in the physical body, as if they were suffering from a backlash. Begone, Su Ming said calmly with an indifferent expression. With just one word, the galaxy instantly distorted, and a vast will erupted from Su Ming's Akang body. Like a windstorm, it swept towards the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. In just the span of a breath, the invisible windstorm containing Su Ming's will touch the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. The second disaster was born in the clone, and the presence that did not belong to this galaxy immediately crumbled and disappeared without a trace. At the instant the second disaster disappeared, the clone threw his head back and let out a low roar. As it reverberated in space, he instantly rose from the initial stage of world plane realm to the peak of that realm, attaining completion in the initial stage of world plane realm. He was now many times more powerful than before. The clone's howl was filled with a heaven-shaking, earth-shattering rumble. His hair floated in the air, and his body instantly became much more powerful than before. When he clenched his fist, the feeling of being in control of power was incredibly beautiful and mesmerizing. This sort of instant increase in strength, especially when one's realm of world plane realm increased exponentially, would immediately cause anyone to be delighted and excited, but Su Ming's two clones frowned at the same time. The power of world plane realm is so thick, and the Duke of Crimson Flame's words when he taught me this art. Once I get through the second disaster, I should have reached the middle stage of world plane realm. Since the middle stage of world plane realm is much stronger than the initial stage of world plane realm, that is why I need the third disaster and the fourth disaster to reach completion in the middle stage of world plane realm. When I go through the fifth disaster, I can step into the later stage of world plane realm. And when I go through the ninth disaster, I will reach completion in world plane realm. I will fuse the 9 disasters into my body, and I will be able to gather together the moon in lunar Kulpa realm and become a powerful warrior in lunar Kulpa realm. But I've completed the second disaster, and I'm only at the peak of the initial stage of world plane realm. There's something wrong with this. Pensive looks appear in the eyes of Su Ming's 2 clones at the same time. Once they cast each other a glance, Su Ming's Akang clone moved his will, and his vast will immediately gathered on the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. As he observed the clone carefully, he controlled the power of world plane realm around him to surge towards him once again. As the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole absorbed the energy, reached completion for the third time, and got rid of the third disaster, Su Ming's clone became stronger once again. Booming sounds that sounded like the beating of drums traveled out from within the clone, and he immediately reached the middle stage of world plane realm from the peak of the initial stage of world plane realm. The middle stage of world plane realm was completely different from the initial stage of world plane realm. It was just like how Su Ming could kill those in the initial stage of world plane realm in the past, but when he ran into those in the middle stage of world plane realm, he had to run. These were 2 completely different realms. In fact, it could be said that only those in the middle stage of world plane realm could be considered as true lords of world planes. Only when they reached this realm could they treat cultivators in heaven cultivation realm as ants. He might have become stronger, but Su Ming still frowned. After a moment of pensive silence, he gathered up the power of world plane from the 100,000 galaxies once again. Time trickled by. An hour later, Su Ming's clone reached completion for the 4th time. He got rid of the 4th disaster, and his body became stronger once again. His presence surged into the sky, and as it shook the entire area, another few hours passed, and he reached completion for the 5th time. If the Duke of Crimson Flame woke up at that moment, he would definitely be so shocked that he would be dumbfounded. This was something that had never happened to his race before. In fact, he could not imagine that the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole could be practiced in this manner. This was a right that could only be obtained after one gained control of the galaxy. As the 5th disaster disappeared, the strength of the clone's physical body reached a state that was near the peak of the middle stage of world plane realm. If he could return to 1,000 years ago, then with his chi alone, he would be able to fight against Zhao family's progenitor without being at a disadvantage. After all, Zhao family's progenitor was only at the peak of the middle stage of world plane realm. This sort of power had allowed his family to become the 3rd strongest in Western Ring Nebula, and it was a telling sign of just how strong he was. As expected, there's something off about the 2nd disaster not being as strong as I expected. The 5th disaster should have allowed my physical body to reach the later stage of world plane realm. But now, this clone that practices the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole can only reach the peak of the middle stage of world plane realm. Is it because this clone of mine is too strong, which is why this art can't reach perfection, or is it because this clone itself has a flaw? Su Ming's eyes sparkled. When he circulated the power of world planes to form the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole once again, he suddenly understood the answer. Because his clone could no longer absorb the power of world planes. The 5th disaster had become its limit. It's a flaw. The Crimson Python Phoenix's flaw. Su Ming shook his head. But all lives in the universe have flaws. Everything they practice is to make up for what they lack. I don't know what the Crimson Python Phoenix's flaw is, but there will come a time when I can make up for it. In silence, Su Ming closed his eyes. The clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole also closed his eyes at that moment. The 3rd change of heart should end now, Su Ming mumbled. As 1,000 years passed, The exchange of ancient memories and nostalgia turned into a thread at the bottom of Su Ming's heart. That thread was like a dot on the tip of a pen, and at that moment, it turned into a circle. At the instant Su Ming's two clones closed their eyes, the same change of mountains and rivers appeared in the 100,000 planets in the galaxy. I will resume updating today. There is one more chapter left, and I'm currently writing it. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 9:31. During that instant, mountains appeared in the 100,000 planets in the galaxy. That mountain was the ninth summit in Su Ming's memories. When the 100,000 ninth summits were born in the 100,000 planets, Su Ming had his eyes closed, and his two clones lifted their hands at the same time. Wisps of golden threads appeared out of nowhere and surrounded the two clones. As the two clones casually formed knots, he began to tie grass knots and weave the people in his memories. Without the interference from Death Region's will, Su Ming, who had emotions and pain once more, immersed himself in weaving the grass knots with divine essence, simply allowing time to pass as he turned all the people he could not forget in his memories into the divine essence puppets in his hands. This was the third change of heart Su Ming had not been able to complete when he was in Crimson Flame Planet. In truth, when Su Ming returned to the ninth summit's disaster in the world in the Stone Monument and killed his enemies, he could complete his third change of heart at any moment he wanted. However, there was a knot in his heart. This knot was a mask formed by Death Region's will. If it did not disappear, it would be difficult for him to complete his third change of heart. When the control of Death Region's will disappeared, the knot in Su Ming's heart was untied. That was why as he closed his eyes, he began the process of ending his change of heart. The galaxy was silent. Su Ming's two clones had smiles on their faces. Their smiles came from a happiness he found in his memories. He was immersed in this happiness, or perhaps he was immersed in the loss he had suffered. He used the method of tying grass knots to make himself remember the things of the past. The change of heart this time did not shake the sky and earth. Neither did it cause a loud bang that surged into the sky. There was only a wisp of Su Ming's soul and two bodies in the silence. He might have seemed happy, but if anyone saw him, they would find him to be sad. The sadness of his soul dyed his hands and fused with the golden grass knots to turn him into a puppet. The divine essence puppets appeared one after another, and 10 years went by. 10 years later, when Su Ming's two clones opened their eyes at the same time, tears fell from his eyes. His third change of heart ended. To Su Ming, this change of heart was a closure to the things of the past, and it was also a new life for him. He weaved the puppets of all the people in his memories. All of them had puppets, but not him. At the instant he opened his eyes, the sadness in them gradually turned dull, turning into something that he cherished in the depths of his soul and an eternal memory at the bottom of his heart. His level of cultivation broke through the peak of Earth Cultivation Realm at that moment. Once he reached Heaven Cultivation Realm, he reached great completion in Heaven Cultivation Realm, but this was no longer important. Su Ming looked at all the dolls before him, at the people who had the presence of his memories. He looked as if he was smiling, but also as if he was crying. Thousands of years had been interspersed with memories. Every memory was a part of the third change of heart. They seemed to be scattered, but there was a thread connecting them. This thread was like a rope made of grass, and the memories he had experienced were like knots made of grass. The change of heart in Crimson Flame Planet was the first knot, and the memories of the past 1,000 years were the other knots. When Su Ming opened his eyes, the final knot on the rope made of grass that changed his heart had finally been tied. Because of it, the moment the seemingly scattered third change of heart was completed, the invisible rope in Su Ming's heart turned into a change of heart puppet. This puppet was the one that was missing from all the puppets he had made during the past 10 years. Himself. After a long while, Su Ming closed his eyes again. When he opened them again, there was an ancient look in his eyes. There was nothing else there. "It's time for me to leave," Su Ming said softly. His arcane clone took a step forward, but he did not leave the galaxy. Instead, he stepped into the 100,000 galaxies and sat down cross-legged. At the instant he closed his eyes, Su Ming's clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole lifted his head and stared at the 100,000 galaxies. A resolute look appeared in his eyes. He gave up on the idea of letting his arcane clone leave. In truth, Su Ming had been mulling over whether he should let his arcane clone leave or not. Only at that moment did he make his decision. The purple arcane was only one of the 10 true parts of arcane. It was incomplete. Even though it had the power to fight against Death Region's will, Su Ming had long since noticed that once he left Western Ring Nebula's foreign land, while his clone would become stronger, it would not be able to compare to the speed of his training in this place. Compared to the world outside, this place was the safest, and it was also the most suitable place for his arcane clone to grow. If Su Ming still wanted his arcane clone to devour the other 9 parts in the end so that he could be complete, then staying in this place was the best choice. Once he went out, there were still some cultivators who could suppress his arcane clone, but as long as Su Ming was given enough time, his arcane clone would grow into an existence that could make the universe tremble. Besides, while it might be difficult for the arcane clone to help Su Ming fight against those in Solar Culpa Realm if he stayed in this place, he could use the power of divine essence in his soul to make Su Ming's cultivation base and his clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole become much stronger. As his arcane clone became stronger, Su Ming in the world outside would also become stronger. Before he found his real, physical body, his arcane clone would be his foundation. That was why Su Ming used the power of this galaxy to make his clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole become stronger. This clone might not have reached the later stage of World Plane Realm, but once it fused with Su Ming's cultivation base and activated the power of divine essence, Su Ming was confident that he could fight against those in the later stage of World Plane Realm. Besides, if Su Ming ran into any life-threatening danger that he could not escape from in the barren lands of divine essence, then with his arcane clone's strength, he could rush over within a short period of time. Besides, as long as his arcane clone stayed in this place, Western Ring Nebula's foreign land would become the safest place for Su Ming. In fact, this place could even be regarded as a cave abode that could not be moved. In this place, Su Ming, who had Sui Chenzi's law activated, did not need to worry about any threats. However, once he chose to have his arcane clone leave for a long period of time, then he would lose all of these advantages, and he would also lose the chance to make his arcane clone complete. Once Su Ming made his choice, he chose to have his arcane clone stay. Besides these thoughts, there was also a suspicion at the bottom of Su Ming's heart. It was also one of the reasons why he had chosen to have his arcane clone stay. This suspicion had existed in Su Ming's heart for a long time. Western Ring Nebula's foreign land is rumored to be an incredibly dangerous place. It is rare for those who step into it to be able to leave. This is something that almost all the people in the barren lands of divine essence know. But since they know this, why did they still come here in large numbers during the 1,000 years? If it was not a few dozens or even a few hundreds of people, then it would have been fine. I could still see it as a personal choice. But there must be a reason for tens of thousands of people to come here. There's no need for me to guess this reason. I can already be certain that this is a bounty offered by the forces of power from the 4 great true worlds, keeping a lookout over the barren lands. That's why there will definitely be brave people who will be willing to take the risk when the reward is great. And the forces of power from the 4 great true worlds, keeping a lookout over the barren lands, will definitely know more about Western Ring Nebula's foreign land compared to other people. Their offer of a bounty for people to come here and kill me might seem understandable, but in truth, a freezing glare shone in Su Ming's eyes. Unless the forces of power from the 4 great true worlds keeping a lookout over the barren lands don't know about the secret of the foreign land, but that's clearly impossible. If I were them, even if I couldn't tell them about the secret, if they really wanted to kill me, they could forcefully enslave 100,000 cultivators and bring them into the foreign land to carry out a complete swap. In fact, if 100,000 people weren't enough, then they would send 200,000, 300,000, or even more. If they did that, they would have to carry out a few rounds of swapping, and I would definitely die. But they didn't do that. I refuse to believe that they didn't think of this. If that's the case, Su Ming's eyes sparkled, and a cold sneer appeared at the corners of his lips. They don't want me to die. Instead, they want to create some false impressions. The goal of doing this. Su Ming lifted his head and cast a glance at the spot where his Akang clone was, then narrowed his eyes. Either it's for the Akang clone, but there are a lot of clues in this, and I can't be certain whether this is the case or not. Besides, even I only managed to succeed by a hair's breadth, so it's unlikely that they would think of this, but I still have to be on guard. Another reason is they want me to obtain divine essence. For example, once I reach 1 million feet using the normal method, I will be able to obtain a small amount of divine essence, and I will be able to leave this place for 1,000 years. Could it be that if I kill those who have divine essence in the world outside, I'll be able to obtain some benefits? A thought appeared in Su Ming's heart. After a moment of pensive silence, he pushed down this question at the bottom of his heart. He shifted his gaze away from his Akang clone and took a step into the air. His body gradually disappeared, but a ray of red light flew out and charged towards the 100,000 galaxies. It was the small candle dragon. Su Ming had left it in this place. There was a thick amount of power of world planes in this place, and it could nourish the small snake. At the instant Su Ming's clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole left, Su Ming's Akang clone opened his eyes in the 100,000 galaxies. Since I've chosen to stay here, then there are still some things I need to do. When the Akang clone spoke flatly, the space behind him immediately distorted, and the shadow of a gigantic purple tree manifested. It swayed slightly, and 10,000 rays of purple light instantly spread out. These 10,000 rays of purple light instantly spread out in all directions and disappeared into the galaxy. Once the Akang clone finished doing this, he closed his eyes once again and began meditating for a long period of time. At that moment, the world with 90,000 stone monuments, which had been maintained for 300-something years, immediately stirred up a buzzing sound when the 10,000 rays of purple light suddenly appeared. All the people in the world with the 90,000 stone monuments were forced out in an instant. Some of them were experiencing this for the first time, but there were also quite a number of them who were experiencing this for the second time. In the midst of their shock and astonishment, they could not help but remember the scene from 300 years ago, which they had almost forgotten. As all the people were forced out, the 10,000 rays of purple light fused into the ground. As the ground rumbled and trembled, 10,000 stone monuments rose from the ground. The spot where these 10,000 stone monuments appeared was the spot where they had disappeared 300 years ago. Once these 10,000 stone monuments appeared, the number of stone monuments in this place returned to 100,000. However, the extra 10,000 did not belong to Akang or Sui Chenzi, but to Su Ming. These were Su Ming's stone monuments. All the people whose names were carved on these 10,000 stone monuments would have their lives and deaths controlled by Su Ming. All of them would dedicate all their time and cultivation to making his Akang clone stronger. From now on, the scam in Western Ring Nebula's foreign land would have an additional person who would get a share of the spoils. The near 90,000 people were all in dead silence at that moment. All sorts of thoughts turned into shock, and bewilderment in their minds. In fact, even their breathing seemed to have frozen as they stared at the 10,000 stone monuments that had appeared with a dumbfounded expression. Only one person had an excited expression on his face. He did not look at the 10,000 stone monuments that had appeared, but instead stared at the stone monument belonging to Su Ming, which had been practically forgotten by the people over the past 300 years. He stared at that stone monument as he waited for a person to appear. Gradually, he saw a vortex appear on the stone monument with Mo Su's name carved on it, and a person walked out of it. He had long gray hair, a tall and straight body, a pale face, and an almost enchanting overlapping runic symbols in his right eye. He was Su Ming's clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole, which contained a Kang's divine essence. Please vote for recommendation. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 932. More accurately speaking, there were not 10,000 rays of purple light spreading out from a Kang's clone, but 9,999 rays. The one remaining ray was Su Ming's stone monument. As the 100,000 stone monuments were completed and the near 90,000 people in the area fell into a suffocating silence, gradually, more people noticed the vortex that had appeared on Su Ming's stone monument and the powerful light that was slowly spreading out from it. That light illuminated the entire world of the stone monuments, causing all the people in the area to be unable to not look at it. For a period of time, the gazes of tens of thousands of people gathered on the stone monument with Mo Su's name carved on it, causing Su Ming, who had walked out of the stone monument, to feel as if he had instantly walked into all their eyes. With an indifferent expression on his face, Su Ming walked out of the vortex. When he completely walked out, the vortex disappeared. Su Ming looked at the familiar land around him, and the hundreds of years he had spent went by in an instant, turning into a sentimental sigh. 300-something years ago, he had gone in search of a serendipity with an indomitable determination. Hundreds of years later, he had returned with a monstrous serendipity and a miracle that could change his life. The tens of thousands of people's gazes gathered on him did not stir up a single ripple in Su Ming's heart. He swept his gaze across the space around him, then eventually turned around to look at his stone monument. The 1,000,000 feet stone monument stood tall among the many stone monuments. It might seem normal, but in Su Ming's eyes, he could see Sui Chunzi's law in this place. He could see the shadow formed by Sui Chunzi's law in the space above him, and that shadow was bowing toward Su Ming. It was as if he was congratulating Su Ming, as if he was waiting for his orders. That action was a form of obedience, obeying Sui Chunzi's will, obeying the orders of the person who had been chosen by the art with just one thought. What is the law Sui Chunzi said? Su Ming asked with his divine thought. The first law is supreme. As long as the first law is not touched, the law will protect and wipe out the people in this place. It will protect the people in this place from being killed by a Kang's soul and wipe out all those who go against the law. Sui Chunzi's ancient voice traveled into Su Ming's mind. The first law. Su Ming seemed to have come to an epiphany. The first law is that a Kang can pay the price of divine essence, and I will help it kill the people in this place. However, if the person who I want to kill is asked to be killed because he failed to possess a Kang, then I will not allow him to do so, no matter what price he has to pay. He can only let that person perish on his own. Su Ming nodded. This could be seen from the fact that the purple Kang had been unable to kill him previously, or else it would have sent its will to this place and killed him. It would not have needed to wait passively. He no longer asked Sui Chunzi about the rules. Su Ming looked at his stone monument quietly. In his eyes, that stone monument was formed by layers of purple crystals. However, its surface was rough, causing others to be unable to see it. In fact, even if he probed it with his divine sense, he would not be able to find any clues. Only he, who had mastered divine essence, possessed his Kang clone, and became one of the people who would get a share of the spoils in this place, could see the secret of the stone monument. This person is his Mo Su. He's the person we came here to capture alive. He is. Buzzing sounds gradually reverberated in the 90,000-something people in the area. Just what happened just now? Why were we suddenly forced out of the world in the stone monuments? Damn it, I was just about to reach a breakthrough. I was just one step away from it. 300 years ago, something similar happened. At that time, he was the only one who didn't appear. 300 years later, this happened again, but he appeared right after it. If this has nothing to do with him, then I'll definitely not believe it. Just what did this Mo Su do in the world of the stone monuments? He could make 10,000 stone monuments disappear and make 10,000 stone monuments gather together again. The sounds of discussions gradually increased, but Su Ming turned a deaf ear to them. He looked at his stone monument and saw a purple leaf in the depths of it. At the instant he saw the purple leaf, Su Ming came to an understanding. He averted his gaze and looked at the near 10,000 stone monuments that had just appeared around him. He saw that all of them were formed by purple crystals, and there was a purple leaf in each of them. When he looked at the purple leaf, a feeling as if they were in perfect harmony rose within him. It was as if with just one thought he could make these near 10,000 stone monuments disappear, and with just one thought he could make these near 10,000 stone monuments become 1,000,000 feet tall. In fact, when he closed his eyes, these 10,000 stone monuments would become his eyes. I see. So that's how it is, Su Ming mumbled softly to himself. When he swept his gaze past the other 90,000 stone monuments around him, he nodded. Su Ming saw 9 different colors on the other 90,000 stone monuments. There were 10,000 stone monuments of each color. These stone monuments were also formed by crystals of different colors, and within them were leaves of different colors. When Su Ming saw through the stone monuments and swept his gaze past the leaves, waves of will that repelled him immediately spread out and prevented him from looking at them. There were 9 wills in total, and they belonged to the 9 colors of the stone monuments and the leaves. A smile appeared on Su Ming's face. When he possessed the purple Ikang, there had always been a question in his heart. Why had he possessed the purple Ikang? Based on his understanding, the purple Ikang was a test for the 100,000 stone monuments to grow to 1,000,000 feet tall. With this thought in mind, he thought about it for a long time, but he could not find an answer. When he reached the end of this train of thought, he realized that if that was truly the case, then the purple Ikang was definitely the strongest among the 10 souls, because it had controlled the beginning of the stone monuments. Among the 100,000 people, there were 90,000 something of them who were under its control. When he possessed the purple Ikang, he saw it summon nearly 10,000 rays of purple light. After he possessed it, as the jumbled memories surged into his mind and he saw it with his own eyes, Su Ming came to an understanding. His previous guess was wrong. The purple Ikang did not control the beginning of the 100,000 stone monuments. In truth, it only controlled 10,000. Each of the 10 souls of Ikang controlled 10,000 stone monuments, and only then could balance be formed. When Sui Chunzi chose Su Ming's stone monument, it was purple in color. That was why, on the first day he came to the land of the stone monuments, he naturally became one of the 10,000 purple Ikang stone monuments. Su Ming also noticed that besides himself, none of the stone monuments that were more than 1,000,000 feet tall were purple in color. Perhaps this was because nearly 10,000 purple stone monuments had all shattered 300-something years ago, but Su Ming could clearly remember the locations and names of the more than 100,000 stone monuments when he had just come to this place 1,000 years ago. When he looked over now, he found that not a single one of them was more than 1,000,000 feet tall. This meant one thing. During the period of time he had come to this place, no purple stone monument had ever surpassed 1,000,000 feet. In fact, Su Ming had also found the answer in the memories of his Ikang clone. 2,000 years ago, when the person whose name was carved on that stone monument suddenly died in the world outside, the last purple stone monument had become several tens of thousands of feet tall once again. If that's the case, then the 100-something stone monuments that reached 900,000-something feet in one go to participate in the test was done on purpose by the purple Ikang. At that time, it was anxious that there would not be 100,000 stone monuments appearing. That's why it intentionally made things easier for us. Su Ming thought back to all the stone monuments that had reached 900,000-something feet after he came to this place. Most of them should have been purple, but clearly, Zhoukang's stone monument was not purple. The 100,000 stone monuments are divided into 10 souls, and each stone monument of a different color can grow to 10,000,000 feet tall. After I possessed him, I thought that the stone monuments in this place would no longer be 10 million feet tall, because I would be the only 1 million feet tall. By the looks of it now, I was wrong. Su Ming shook his head. The Akane clone's memories were incredibly jumbled up. Time was needed for them to slowly fuse together with Su Ming, which was why he did not immediately search for the answer in his memories. But this is even better. My Akane clone will become stronger with the help of the 10,000 people here, and I'll be outside killing all the other Akane souls whose stone monuments have grown to more than 1 million feet tall. By doing so, I can stop the other stone monuments of other colors from growing. Only the people with purple stone monuments will become stronger, and it will be much easier for my Akane clone to devour the other 9 souls. Mo Su. As Su Ming was immersed in his thoughts, an uncertain voice reached his ears. Su Ming turned his head in the direction of the voice and saw Zhou Tai standing not too far away. It had been 300 years since they last met, but Zhou Tai's appearance was not much different from the past, except that he had become slightly older. At that moment, when he looked towards Su Ming, there was excitement on his face. This excitement was not because of the deep friendship between him and Su Ming, but because he wanted an answer that could prove that his wife was right. Big Brother Zhou. A smile appeared on Su Ming's face, and he called out to Zhou Kong in an amiable tone. Just what happened? Why didn't you come out for hundreds of years in the world with your stone monuments? Were these 2 changes because of you? Was my wife's guess correct? Zhou Kong forced down his excitement, and his voice trembled slightly. He longed to know the answer. Even if this answer could not bring him freedom, it was his wife's deepest question in the past. Even if his wife had already died, he still wanted to know everything. Su Ming looked at Zhou Kong. If this person had not told him about his experience in the past and told him about his wife's guess, then there was a high possibility that Su Ming would not have walked down the path of the 5 illusory echelons. If that was truly the case, then perhaps Su Ming would still have chosen to possess Zhou Kong. But possession was difficult. If even the slightest mistake occurred, then there was a high possibility that he would fail. In fact, even if Su Ming was asked to possess Zhou Kong again, he still did not have complete confidence that he would succeed. Just as Su Ming was about to answer Zhou Kang's question, he suddenly frowned and lifted his head to look at the space above him. At that moment, quite a number of the 90,000-something people in the area immediately confirmed Su Ming's identity after making guesses and deliberating over it. You're Mo Su, the one who was wanted by the 4 great true worlds in the past. Damn it, it's you. If you didn't provoke the forces of power from the 4 great true worlds keeping a lookout over the barren lands and have them issue a bounty for you, how could we have come to this accursed place and lost our freedom? You little bastard, I might not be able to kill you in this place, but you'll also lose your freedom and won't be able to go out. You'll also have to face death. I like to see just who will be the first to die. Malicious voices instantly rang out. The cultivators who had spoken were all people who had entered this place during the past 300 years and knew of the rule that they were not allowed to attack in this place. However, the aggrieved feelings in their hearts during the past 300 years caused their words to immediately turn malicious once they recognized Su Ming. Almost at the same time their malicious words rang out, loud booming sounds immediately came from the spot where Su Ming was looking. Hundreds of people appeared at the same time, and when they descended, their expressions were filled with confusion, complicated emotions, pleasant surprise, shock, and all sorts of other emotions. These people were newcomers, but Su Ming's gaze was not on them. He was still looking at the air. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 9:33. Little bastard, if it wasn't for the fact that we can't fight in this place, I would have definitely killed you. You're the one who caused us to end up in this place. You'll die a horrible death. The 90,000 people who had previously spoken maliciously to Su Ming looked at the hundreds of new arrivals with schadenfreude in their eyes. They were continuously cursing to vent the depression in their hearts. In this place where they could not fight, besides cursing, there was no other way for them to vent their anger. Even if these curses did not have any lethality, but if they did not do this, what else could they do? I curse your entire family to die a horrible death. I curse all your people to die a horrible death. I curse your wife to be humiliated by others. I curse your bloodline to wither away. That's right, all of this is because of you, you damn bastard. If I have the chance to make my stone monument reach 1,000,000 feet, I will definitely search for all the people who are friends with you and kill them. Only then will I be able to vent the hatred in my heart. Voices rose and fell nonstop. These people looked as if they had gone mad, and their curses became even stronger. It was difficult for them to remain calm after having been oppressed for hundreds of years. Once they witnessed the deaths, they placed all the blame on Su Ming. Su Ming acted as if he did not hear them, at all, causing the curses to become even stronger. In fact, there were even more people who started cursing him viciously. They hoped that Su Ming would retort, because only by doing so would they be able to find a hint of pleasure, and only then would they be able to release more of the depression and despair they felt towards this place. They were pitiful people, because if a cultivator was reduced to using words to curse others, then it would undoubtedly be a miserable thing. As they spoke, and Su Ming looked at the air calmly, the hundreds of new arrivals landed on the ground, and the hundreds of purple stone monuments in Su Ming's eyes immediately shone with a dazzling light. Under that light, names appeared on the hundreds of stone monuments. As the light shone brilliantly, the hundreds of stone monuments immediately started rising. This was the initial increase based on the person's level of cultivation. As booming sounds reverberated in the air, one of the hundreds of stone monuments reached 30,000-something feet. Most of the others were only 20,000-something feet tall. It was rare to see a 300-meter-tall stele right from the start. Immediately, someone's gaze landed on an old man among the hundreds of people. The old man's expression was grim, and blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. He wiped the blood away and silently sat down cross-legged, ignoring all the gazes directed at him. He looked up into the void, and deep within his eyes was a trace of killing intent and hatred. It's him. Su Ming cast the old man a glance and smiled faintly. The peak of the middle stage of World Plane Realm. That person is an old monster at the peak of the middle stage of World Plane Realm. By the looks of it, he's injured. Could it be that he came here to hide from his enemies? The ancestor of the Zhao family. He's the ancestor of the Zhao family. What happened outside in the past few hundred years? To think that the patriarch of the Zhao family would be forced to come here. In the midst of the shock of the people in the area, besides the old man, most of the hundreds of people looked around with complicated expressions. When they saw the 90,000 people in the area, they were first stunned, but when their gazes swept past the crowd and landed on Su Ming's face, delight immediately appeared on some of their faces. Mo Su. He's Mo Su. I remember his face. It hasn't changed since 1,000 years ago. He's the Mo Su who can get his freedom. In fact, there was even a man who was clearly incredibly hot-tempered, who threw his head back and laughed. He instantly moved forward and charged towards Su Ming. His actions turned into derision and cold sneers in the eyes of the 90,000 people in the area. They looked as if they were watching a show. They could already imagine that the moment this person attacked would be the moment he died. Mo Su. The man was incredibly quick. Once he closed in on Su Ming in an instant, he lifted his right hand with a ferocious smile. Just as he was about to bring his hand down, Su Ming averted his gaze from the void and cast the man a flat glance. It was just one glance, but the man instantly felt as if thunder had exploded in his heart. He had a strong feeling that while Su Ming's gaze might seem calm, there was an awe-inspiring might contained within it that he could not resist. That pressure surpassed his level of cultivation and stood above everything else. In fact, the man even had the misconception that he had become Su Ming's servant and that his life and death were in Su Ming's hands. With just one thought, he would instantly disappear, no matter what level of cultivation he had. The pressure that came from the soul turned into fear and a sharp pain that made the man shudder in midair. He let out a shrill scream of pain and fell straight down. At the same time his body started rapidly withering away, his screams of pain reverberated in the area, but he did not die immediately. Clearly, Su Ming still did not want to kill him. The man was a person from the Purple Stone Monument, and Su Ming was the master of the Purple Stone Monument. This scene immediately caught the attention of the hundreds of people who had just arrived. Their expressions changed, clearly intimidated by this scene. Even Zhao family's progenitor, who had a dark expression on his face, instinctively cast a glance over, and he immediately saw Su Ming. At the instant he looked over, he recognized Su Ming. He shook his head with a slightly complicated expression, and Zhao family's progenitor looked towards the air with a sullen expression once again, as if he was waiting for something. Ignoring the screaming man, Su Ming looked towards Zhou Kong and spoke softly. "Big brother Zhou, your guess is correct." Once Su Ming finished speaking, he swept his gaze past all the people who had cursed him just now. "You're pitiful," Su Ming said calmly. "If you want freedom, then I can give it to you." Su Ming's voice was neither fast nor slow. As he spoke, he lifted his right hand and pointed forward. That finger pointed towards the old man who had cursed Su Ming's entire tribe through the air. The old man laughed coldly. He could not attack in this place. If Mo Su dared to attack him, then he would definitely die. That was why there was not a hint of fear in him. Instead, as he laughed coldly, he continued speaking. "Not only will I curse your entire tribe, I will also curse you." Before he could finish speaking, his expression suddenly changed drastically. At the instant Su Ming pointed at him, his body immediately turned into nothingness, starting from his feet. "This is impossible. You. The old man's expression was filled with shock. Fear filled his heart and soul, but that was all he could say. In an instant, his body turned into ashes, as if he had been forcefully wiped off. "And you," Su Ming pointed again, and another cultivator who had cursed him viciously just now let out a shrill scream of pain before his body instantly turned into ashes. This scene completely shocked all the people in the area. To them, this was an unimaginable terror, and it was especially so when Su Ming had killed someone, but was not punished in the slightest. This caused the fear in the people's hearts to instantly become stronger. "You too." Su Ming lifted his finger and pointed again. Immediately, another person's body disappeared as he screamed in despair. Because of it, the area instantly burst into an uproar. As the people retreated, the people who had cursed Su Ming just now instantly went mad. Some of them retreated, but there were also some whose eyes sparkled as they charged towards Su Ming. A strange thought rose in the hearts of all those who rushed towards Su Ming at that moment. Could it be that I can attack in this place? Yet right at the instant they executed their divine abilities, a vast will swept through the area. All those who used their divine abilities to land on Su Ming were wiped off once that will swept past them. Fear, shock, disbelief, and all sorts of emotions rose in the hearts of the tens of thousands of people in the area at that instant. They could not believe what they were seeing. The people who had cursed Su Ming just now and had yet to die immediately wanted to enter the world in the stone monuments to hide. The fear in their hearts turned into despair, along with heinous resentment and terror. They could not understand why Su Ming could kill. Besides, it did not seem like he was attacking with his power, but the laws in the land seemed to be listening to his words. All those who he wanted to kill would be wiped off by the laws in the land. As these people scattered, some of them even touched the stone monuments. They spread out, making it seem as if it would be difficult to kill all of them in an instant. But at that moment, Su Ming spoke flatly. "Wipe them all off." Only Su Ming could see the shadows formed by the laws in the land bending their backs and bowing towards him. Then, the will of the laws immediately spread out, and shrill screams of pain came from the mouths of all those who had cursed Su Ming just now. Their bodies were about to shatter, and their faces were filled with fear and despair. Suddenly, all of the cultivators' minds trembled, and their faces flickered as 9 ancient, boundless wills appeared out of thin air. Each of the 9 wills was equivalent to the purple Ikang, and they were powerful enough to instantly kill a person. With anger, they descended together and charged towards Su Ming. The 9 wills in Su Ming's soul were the remaining 9 souls in a Kang's body, and they were incredibly displeased towards Su Ming killing their tributes. They had a promise between them that they could not kill each other's tributes, or else no cultivators would come to this place, and they would not be able to obtain what they needed to heal themselves. That was why when Su Ming killed their tributes, they descended in anger and questioned him. Why did you break our promise? Why did you kill my tributes? Purple, you have to give us an explanation. Purple, they are my tributes. If you don't give me a satisfactory explanation, then even if I have to pay a certain price for killing some of my people, I will use the law in this land to kill you several times as many tributes. In the face of the anger from the 9 wills in his soul, Su Ming did not back down. He also sent out his own will to clash against the 9 wills. Your tributes have offended me. Su Ming's will did not compromise in the slightest. Instead, his will echoed in the air in a forceful manner. The 9 wills instantly stopped questioning him, as if they were thinking about Su Ming's words. Should those who offend a Kang be killed? Su Ming's will became even more unyielding. Several breaths later, the 9 wills roared once again. They should be killed. Those who offend a Kang should be killed. I see, so that's how it is. Then they should die. They're just tributes. How dare they offend a Kang? They should die. As the 9 wills roared, the people who had insulted Su Ming just now, regardless of whether they had scattered or were prepared to enter the world in the stone monuments, all disappeared into thin air with shrill screams of pain. Urgent request for recommendation votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 9:34. When living beings of the same level fought against each other, they would be robbing each other of their lives. This was killing. The suppression of the strong towards the weak, the presence that could change the weather with just a flip of their hands. They called killing as granting death. And when they surpassed the level of life and gathered together ants with the will of the universe, then this could not be called killing, much less granting death. This was erasing. It was as if there were pictures on a drawing board, and there were lives within those pictures. When Su Ming swiped his hand across the drawing board, the picture would be erased, and all the lives within it would also be erased. At that moment, all the people in the land with the 100,000 stone monuments still had the lingering sounds of shrill cries echoing in their ears. Once they saw Su Ming killing nearly 100 people with just a casual wave of his hand, the word erase appeared in their minds. Fear, trembling, shock, and all sorts of other emotions turned into suffocation, causing the world within the 100,000 stone monuments to fall into dead silence in an instant. Almost everyone, including Zhou Kong, instinctively looked towards Su Ming, and their gazes were filled with deep respect. There was no way they could not tell that this was the law formed by Sui Chenzi in this place, and it was obeying Su Ming's orders. There was no way they could not tell that Sui Chenzi's law was not just obeying Su Ming's orders. In fact, it could even be said that there was a strange connection between them. If someone had control over the law in the world with the 100,000 stone monuments, then no one would dare provoke them, because they could decide each person's life and death. In fact, if Su Ming wanted to, he could make Sui Chenzi's law instantly kill all the people here, but the result of doing so would be that he would completely break off his relationship with the 9 souls of a Kang, and they would reject him fiercely. The 9 souls would then be wary of him. It would be incredibly difficult for Su Ming to devour them in the future. Besides, once Su Ming wiped off all these people, then the 9 souls of a Kang would even work together to fight against him. This would not be worth it. That was why, even if the temptation was incredibly great, Su Ming did not choose such a radical method. Also, the law in this place was to protect and kill. If Su Ming made this request, then the law might fall silent. After all, Sui Chenzi's law obeying Su Ming's orders was within the rules, unless Su Ming's level of cultivation allowed him to set a new law in this place. Su Ming's expression was calm. It was as if wiping away the lives of nearly 100 people was insignificant to him. He did not even consider whether these people truly deserved to die. To him, this was not important. More importantly, these people who had been wiped off their memories had come here for the bounty offered by the four great true worlds to kill him. More importantly, these people had insulted him. Just because of this, they lost the right to continue living because they had obtained freedom. They had obtained the freedom Su Ming had granted them. They no longer needed to sink into eternal oblivion in the land with the 100,000 stone monuments. When the people in the area looked at Su Ming with respect, he lifted his head and swept his gaze across the people around him. All those who met his gaze felt their hearts tremble. No matter what level of cultivation they possessed, as long as they were the people on the stone monuments, they would instinctively lower their heads. They did not dare to meet Su Ming's gaze and did not dare to anger him. Su Ming swept his gaze across the area and paused for a moment on Zhou Kang's stone monument. He had already noticed that Zhou Kang's stone monument was blue. In the end, Su Ming's gaze landed on the man who was twitching non-stop on the ground. He might no longer be screaming in pain, but his body was as withered as a skeleton, and he only had one breath left. This man was the first person to attack Su Ming just now. His stone monument was purple, and Su Ming did not need to give any explanation to the 9 souls of a Kang if he wanted to kill this person, because at the instant this man came to this place, he had become Su Ming's tribute. Since it wasn't easy for you to reach this level of cultivation, and since you are my tribute, I will spare your life, Su Ming said flatly. He swung his right hand, and the trembling and twitching man immediately stopped. Once he regained his senses, he stood up with great difficulty. His fear towards Su Ming had reached its peak, and he quickly wrapped his fist in his palm before bowing deeply to Su Ming. When the words tribute fell into his ears, they also fell into the minds of the people around him, and they turned into shock and bewilderment. The hundreds of you are all my tributes, Su Ming said flatly, and walked forward. As Su Ming spoke flatly, he walked forward. When he arrived beside the man, he followed behind him with respect on his face. When Su Ming arrived in front of the hundreds of people who had just ascended, he did not stop. However, a mighty pressure that only these hundreds of people could sense spread out from his body. To the hundreds of cultivators, this mighty pressure was like the might of heaven. At the instant they sensed it, their hearts trembled violently, and a feeling that Su Ming could control their lives and deaths rose in their hearts. This feeling was incredibly real. In fact, they discovered to their shock that their hearts were beating at the same frequency as the others, and this frequency belonged to Su Ming. When Su Ming's heart beat, their hearts would beat along with it. This strange scene caused the hundreds of people to move back simultaneously when Su Ming walked over. In fact, there were dozens of people whose faces turned pale and their minds roared. The mighty pressure of the soul spreading out from Su Ming's body made their hearts feel as if they were about to break down. There was a powerful will in their minds that made them kneel down and worship Su Ming. It was as if they did not kneel down and worship him, they would die, and if they did not kneel down, their souls would not obey them. One of the young men shuddered, and with a thud, he became the second person to kneel down and worship Su Ming. Soon after, the second, third, fourth. These hundreds of people knelt down and worshipped Su Ming when he walked over. When he arrived in front of Zhao family's progenitor, the hundreds of people on the purple stone monuments around him had all knelt down and worshipped him. Zhao family's progenitor had long since averted his gaze from the space above him to focus on Su Ming. As Su Ming walked over and the hundreds of people around him knelt down and worshipped him, the powerful will in his mind pressed down on him, causing his breathing to quicken, veins to pop up on his face, and sweat to cover his entire body. He was fighting against the will in his body and his own soul. As Zhao family's progenitor, he would definitely not kneel down and worship anyone, but the strength of the will in his body was not his cultivation base, but his soul. It was a suppression of a different level, and it caused Zhao family's progenitor to tremble even more violently. He even let out low growls. "We meet again," Su Ming said calmly while standing in front of Zhao family's progenitor. Zhao family's progenitor did not say a single word, because at that moment, he could not speak. All his strength was used to fight against his soul. If he relaxed even the slightest bit, he might immediately lose control of his body and kneel down. But this was secondary, because even if Su Ming wanted him to kneel down, it was just his body. What truly terrified Zhao family's progenitor and made him regret stepping into the foreign land to avoid being killed was what he felt at that moment. As his soul fought against his own, he discovered that not only was he afraid of Su Ming, he was also filled with respect. In fact, there was even a will to obey him that he could not fight against. This was not just a feeling from his body, but also from his soul and mind. It was as if once he stepped into this place, a controller had appeared in his life, a master had appeared. Su Ming no longer spoke. He just stood quietly in front of Zhao family's progenitor. The hundreds of people around him were kneeling down and worshiping him. The tens of thousands of people further away were already dumbfounded when they saw this scene. At that moment, the words Su Ming had said just now appeared in their minds. Tribute. Just what sort of serendipity did he obtain in the world in the stone monument? How could he? How could he be so strong? Even the laws obey him, and the abnormalities in the stone monument have appeared twice. This must be the reason why he can be so strong. Just what did he do? Just what did he obtain? Why are those hundreds of people kneeling down and worshiping him? Could it be that he has become the law? Even if his stone monument has reached 1 million feet and he has mastered a portion of the power of divine essence, in my memories, none of the people who had their stone monuments reach 1 million feet in the past could compare to him. In fact, forget about 1 million feet. Even those who have reached 2 million feet, 3 million feet, or even more would not be able to do this. There was no buzzing discussion, but guesses that appeared in the minds of the tens of thousands of people in the area turned into an invisible storm that was swirling in the hearts of the tens of thousands of people in the area. Sweat poured down Zhao family's progenitor's entire body. He trembled even more furiously, and red filled his eyes. As despair appeared on his face, he slowly knelt down. When his knees touched the ground, he knelt down and worshipped Su Ming, just like the others around him. Almost at the instant Zhao family's progenitor knelt down and worshipped Su Ming, a loud rumble suddenly came from the air above him. A gigantic crack looked as if it had been torn apart, and as a long string of laughter reverberated in the air, a person walked out of the crack. It has been 1,000 years, and I've returned to this place. Zhao Tiangang, you old bastard, did you think that you could find the reason behind my strength just because you escaped to this place? In truth, my true goal was to force you to this place. I'll let you sink into endless oblivion and experience the pain I felt when you forced me to hide in this place all those years ago. I've already sentenced thousands of your people to death. Don't worry, once my stone monument reaches 2 million feet, I will leave this place for another 1,000 years and kill all your people. As that long string of laughter spread in all directions, all the people in the area noticed an old man dressed in a long blue robe walking towards them from the air. The owner of the 1 million feet stone monument. That person is Gong Sun Yin. It's him. He's the Gong Sun Yin who left this place 1,000 years ago. He's back. Quite a number of the people in the area immediately recognized the old man. The old man was ugly, and his hair was a mess, but he had already reached the later stage of World Plane Realm. There was an arrogant look on his face as he walked towards Su Ming, but when he saw Zhao family's progenitor kneeling before Su Ming, his voice immediately came to a halt, and he was momentarily stunned. Zhao family's progenitor fell silent. The long string of laughter and the voice that reached his ears caused him to lower his head. A complicated emotion that he could not describe with words turned into sorrow and anguish in his heart. He did not lift his head to look at the enemy who had killed most of his family members and forced him to step into the foreign land to hide, because at the moment he knelt down, he had already fallen into despair. However, Su Ming, who stood before him, lifted his head. Only I can reprimand my tribute. Who do you think you are? Su Ming asked flatly. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.